Chapter 1872, Showing Off Their Respective Strength. Chapter 1872, Showing Off Their Respective Strength. On the spectators' seats, a round of cheers suddenly rose up. For ordinary spectators, they were not concerned who would win or lose. As long as they could see an exciting battle, they would be satisfied. After spending so much money, what they wanted to see was blood spilling and flesh tearing. And now Ling Han's blood was finally spilt, which naturally caused their emotions to climax instantly. Kill, kill, kill. Some were shouting with bloodshot eyes. That frantic madness was no less than that of Zhao Qingfeng himself, if not more. Sun Dong also belonged to them. As he yelled, he was still waving his arms in excitement. Pa! Lu Xianming immediately delivered a slap at him. Sun Dong's whole person spun around on the spot from the impact. Then, he was baffled and asked in confusion, "Holy Sun, why did you hit me?" He felt very innocently wronged. Lu Xianming humphed. As one of superior status, did he have to give his subordinates an explanation? If you can't discern my body language, you still think of becoming my trusted aide. Idiot. Although Sun Dong had a fondness for women, he was a very clever man. When he realized that Lu Xianming was showing a strong displeasure, he hurriedly murmured his apologies. As for the reason, that could be discussed later. On the other side, Cheng Fengyun was even more excited. Because of Ling Han, he had suffered a lot. The noble young master of Cheng clan actually had to eat rock, slap himself, and even run naked. How could that be endured? After being repressed for 10 days, his emotions exploded in an instant, which naturally made him exhilarated to the extreme. Kill! Zhao Qingfeng, kill! He shouted, his face flushed red. Even the veins below his skin were popping, and it was very possible that his heart would explode due to overexcitement. Bewitching Maiden Ro was even more anxious and thought, why has this idiot not admitted defeat yet? Does he want to be beaten to death? Why are you being so stubborn? To say nothing of her, even Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was a little uncertain. Though she knew Ling Han's strength very well, Zhao Qingfeng's battle prowess was too vicious, and he had indeed wounded Ling Han with a single strike. She couldn't help but worry, her pretty face showing her anxiety. Brother, this brat can't hold on for much longer, Shantian Wu said excitedly. Under his brother's abuse of authority, he no longer dared to make a move on Ling Han. However, that did not mean that he did not hate Ling Han anymore. Now, as he watched Ling Han suffer an injury, it was as if he had been injected with adrenaline. That was how excited he was. Meanwhile, Shantianjiu was much more reserved. He smiled slightly, yet in his heart, he thought that all this was only a matter of course. Zhao Qingfeng was too strong, and even the holy sons and holy daughters of Celestial King tier-level sects had been instantly defeated by him. At most, Ling Han could only be the holy son from a Celestial King tier-level force. Faced with Zhao Qingfeng, it was definite that he would be outmatched. To last for so long before finally sustaining injuries was already very much beyond his expectations. Even those powerful figures nodded their heads continuously. Zhao Qingfeng's strength had already reached the peak stage of the Severing Mundane tier, and had in fact surpassed that, because there was a large vacuum of battle prowess between the Severing Mundane tier and Dividing Soul tier. The present Zhao Qingfeng was within this vacuum. How could he not be strong? The spectators' cheers seemed capable of crumbling mountains and overturning seas. There were practically not many here that knew Ling Han, so they naturally would not be cheering for him. They were all leaning in favor of the elite. Zhao Qingfeng, Zhao Qingfeng, Zhao Qingfeng. Everyone all cheered together, as if wanting to shatter the sky itself. Zhao Qingfeng bared his teeth in a menacing grin and raised the sword to level, aiming straight at Ling Han. If you can't completely ignite my Tao heart, what meaning is there for you to continue living? Just die. He roared and charged towards Ling Han. Scram! Ling Han roared furiously. Brandishing his sword, he received the incoming attack. The brightness of lightning exploded madly, and fiery flames were still burning within. He, too, had channeled his divine sword and used the regulations of fire. He kept feeling that Zhao Qingfeng had not used his full strength. Thus, he, too, had only channeled the regulations of lightning all this while, exchanging blows with the other. Now, since the other had revealed his trump card, he, too, began to unleash his true battle prowess. You want a breakthrough? So do I. So let's just see who will become the stepping stone for the other. Boom! The two swords clashed, and a brilliant light surged out from the point where the blades clashed. Very soon, a pinpoint of light turned into a massive ball of light, which then turned into a terrifying explosion, sweeping out in all directions. Pong, pong, pong. All around the arena, multiple formation patterns lit up, blocking the shock wave that had gone berserk. Even so, the spectators were all dazed and looked completely beside themselves. Too strong, really too strong. Was this really the strength that a severing mundane tier should have? What was more frightening was that Ling Han actually turned his dire situation around. His whole body was burning with fiery flames, bestowing his brilliance on the world like a sun god. In this exchange, it was still Ling Han that was at a disadvantage, but it was no longer one-sided. This was a worthy battle. On the spectators' seats, the powerful figures all closed their mouths, sinking into silence. After a long while, the shorty with braided hair finally said, "This brat is still only a third Severance Peak stage." Ling Han's strength naturally would not be taken to heart by these powerful figures, but the problem here was that there was a third Severance Peak stage cultivator that had actually also stepped into the vacuum between severing mundane tier and dividing soul tier. This was really too exaggerating. Then when you advanced into the fourth severance, could it be that you would be able to match the dividing soul tier? Matching dividing soul tier is impossible. Even Yin Xinlu could not possibly fight a dividing soul tier opponent while he is still at the fourth severance. He would only be able to defeat all other severing mundane tiers. A powerful figure spoke up. Unless he can advance into the fifth severance, several mighty figures said at the same time. But when they said this, they all shook their heads. This was a possibility that was close to zero. Hee, since you all don't have a high opinion of this kid, I will take him as my disciple then, the shorty with braided hair said. Old geezer who, the height of battle prowess is one story, but what does that have to do with taking disciples? An elder with a tall build hurriedly jumped in. This brat, I, too, have the interest to take him as my disciple. I, on the other hand, do not want to take him as my disciple. However, I would like to take him in as a son-in-law. Another powerful figure said. Suddenly, all these big shots were arguing with red faces. Ha 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 ha, this only makes it interesting. Zhao Qingfeng was not stunned because of Ling Han's aggressive counterattack. Instead, he looked delighted. Only if Ling Han was strong enough could he completely arouse his murderous heart. Die! He charged over, laughing madly. He brandished his sword in a swipe, and delivered millions and millions of flashes of sword chi that filled the entire arena. This was the range of his sword chi. Because he was a metal element divine fetus, he was born with an affinity with metal, and could easily manipulate it at his slightest whim. And now, all the metal element of the heaven and earth had turned into sword chi, and added with his control of regulations at the fourth severance. This destructive power was unimaginable. Shua, all the sword chi shot out simultaneously, wanting to turn Ling Han into a beehive. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The sword chi descended together, turning into a massive ball of blades, and Ling Han was completely drowned in it. Is he dead yet? On the spectators' seats, everyone was holding their breath. This kind of battle was really too intense, too exciting, and they had even forgotten to breathe. Boom! Suddenly, a pillar of flame burst out from within the ball of blades, melting the ball of blades with its heat. Ling Han was standing proudly there, completely unwounded. Gasp! The spectators all exclaimed in shock. This was a little too strong, wasn't it? This Ling Han. Who exactly was he? Could it be that he was the Holy Son from some celestial king tier-level sect, and had deliberately concealed his identity? Yet Zhao Qingfeng only laughed maniacally and pounced. brandishing his sword in a swift slash. Ice's murderous heart was blazing. Ling Han's strength had already caused his killing intent to completely boil over, and now the only thing left was to deliver the killing strike on Ling Han so he could be completely refined. Chapter 1873, Frightening Destructive Power. Chapter 1873, Frightening Destructive Power. Ling Han released a battle cry. The divine demon's sword swept out in a slash, clashing harshly with Zhao Qingfeng without the slightest show of weakness. The two young elites were utterly brilliant, earnestly releasing their brightness, which was strong enough to dazzle the galaxies and last for eternity. Some holy sons and holy daughters of celestial king tier-level sects had not left, and were all dazed by this scene. Then, they paled in dejection. They could not compare, they really could not compare. While they, too, were emperor tiers, compared with these two, it was like one had just barely started, while the other had already reached the apex. They were on completely two different levels. What was more unacceptable and more unimaginable to them was that this was actually not the strongest of the severing mundane tier. Firstly, Ling Han was still a third severance peak stage. After he entered into the fourth severance, his battle prowess would definitely increase tremendously. Secondly, above these two people, there was another mountain that could not be moved. Yin Xianlu. Just how strong would he be then? Ling Han's excitement was aroused with the battle. Using the immovable deity metal body, he manifested 6 arms and began to channel even more celestial techniques. Mere party tricks. Zhao Qingfeng scoffed. Though he was not a holy son, he was stronger than 99 and of all holy sons, and had a grasp of even more celestial techniques. His figure blurred, and his whole body suddenly enlarged to 10 times the original size, and harshly stomped on Ling Han with a single foot. This stomp was like a bronze mountain descending, and what was more astonishing was that there were countless seals flickering on the sole of his foot, and that was what was the most deadly about it. Is that right? Ling Han smirked and lightly pressed with one arm. Vanish. All of a sudden, that massive figure of Zhao Qingfeng vanished. But it was only an instant, and that massive foot had shattered the space, reappearing abruptly. Then, it was Zhao Qingfeng's gigantic figure. He clearly was only 15 to 18 meters tall, yet it was as if he was capable of supporting both heaven and earth. An iron fist flew over, directly aiming for Zhao Qingfeng's face. Ling Han was already long waiting for him. Humph! Zhao Qingfeng was not flustered at all. I's whole head of black hair danced wildly, turning into sharp spikes that pierced towards Ling Han's left eye. You gave me a punch, and I would pay you back with a single sword strike. Ling Han did not even think of dodging or withdrawing his punch. This punch flew in a straight course, and he only closed his left eye and slightly leaned his head to the side. Pong! This punch and sword strike both landed solidly. This was the first time Zhao Qingfeng had been struck by Ling Han. Under the blast of this fist, his whole person retreated a few dozen steps back, and with every step back, it had forcefully created a deep footprint on the ground. However, there were protective formations here, so the ground under his feet returned back to normal in a mere instant. A fist-shaped groove had shockingly appeared on Zhao Qingfeng's face, and what was strange was that his skin hadn't broken, nor was there any blood spilt. It was as if his fist had punched a metallic object, forcefully causing it to curve inwards. Bronze divine fetus truly had strong defenses. On the other side, the hair spikes had pricked Ling Han's face, but could not penetrate it at all. They only swiped past his face, leaving behind bloody marks that started from the corner of the left eye all the way to the right corner of the lips on Ling Han's face. Ling Han wiped his face. There was some blood on his hand. He channeled the indestructible heavens scroll, and the bloody marks on his face instantly became lighter and recovered. This strike. At the moment, it was unclear who was at the upper hand. I want to kill you more and more, Zhao Qingfeng declared, the groove on his face slowly filling back out, and he, too, very quickly regained his original appearance. However, there was still the shape of a fist left behind. Clearly, His defenses could not compare with Ling Han's. This was natural. Firstly, Zhao Qingfeng was only a divine fetus, and what level was the indestructible heaven scroll at? Secondly, a metal element divine fetus was more focused on the offensive in the first place, and was not so much geared towards defense. Thirdly, it was mainly because his cultivation level was higher. Otherwise, it definitely would not have been so easy for him to recover. Ling Han took in a deep breath. After battling to this moment, he had no choice but to admit that the other party was the strongest opponent he had faced since entering into the celestial realm. If it had been before he had been tempered by the immortal flames, and their cultivation level had been completely equal, it would have been really hard to say who would be coming out the victor. And now, Ling Han could still manage a tie while his cultivation level was still a minor level lower, which showed fully the benefits being tempered by immortal flames had brought him. It had really strengthened him too much. If he couldn't even deal with Zhao Qingfeng now, what right did he have to compare to Yin Xinlu? Furthermore, Yin Xinlu might not be the strongest severing mundane tier in the celestial realm, either. Just come at me. Ling Han's fighting spirit blazed. He was the same as the Rain Emperor. They were both the type to become stronger with battle, and they could gain inspiration from battle too, breaking through in an instant. After this battle, his confidence and first severance would definitely improve to a new height, and there would be hopes for him to break through to the fourth severance. I will send you on your way. Zhao Qingfeng smiled coldly, stretching out his hand, and then flipping it over. Murderous shadow. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Suddenly, countless flashes of murderous aura surged out from the palm of his hand, turning into multiple human figures. All of them looked exactly like Zhao Qingfeng, and even the aura they exuded was not different in the slightest. This time, everyone was astounded. One Zhao Qingfeng was already so hard to deal with, and now with 1, 2, 3, 4. There were already several dozen Zhao Qingfengs. Then wouldn't he be invincible in the severing mundane tier? He was called Invincible Qingfeng, and it was definitely not bragging. He truly was very strong. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. The Eye of Truth was already long since obsolete. He could not tell what difference these figures of murderous aura had with the original at all. He was not concerned, though, because he was sure that his physique was definitely invincible in the severing mundane tier. Even when meeting a fifth severance, as long as he had advanced into the fourth severance, he would be qualified to fight the former. If he had advanced into the fifth severance, then he could ignore even Yang Soul tier elites. Come on then. Zhao Qingfeng manifested a total of 99 doppelgangers, and added with the original, they just happened to total 100. He laughed, pointing his sword at Ling Han, and the other 99 doppelgangers did the same movement at the same time. Ultimate strike. He charged towards Ling Han, the murderous shadows blasting together. The light of Great Tao shone brilliantly. This strike was a perfect merging of the regulation of slaughter and regulations of metal. Ling Han smiled calmly and struck out with a palm. Wang, boundless coldness suddenly arose. The source power of water activated. This was the Xianin source water, a celestial king tier-level entity. Merely in terms of level, there was not a single object or person that could reign over it. Freezing 1,000 miles. Ka, ka, ka. This coldness was too terrifying. It seeped out to the sides of the arena and activated the protective formations, creating snowflakes on the formation patterns. At first, the attacks of severing mundane tiers naturally were no issue and could be easily dispelled by the formations. But who asked for this to be Ling Han's source power, and a source water of the heaven and earth to be showing its might? Pa, pa, pa. The ice shattered, actually destroying a sliver of the formation patterns. Though it was practically indiscernible, a great many powerful figures all paled. You fucking freak. This formation was ascending origin tier and level, and a severing mundane tier brat actually managed to destroy a bit of it. Though it was a pitifully small portion, what did this mean? Ling Han had the ability to kill ascending origin tiers. Of course, the prerequisite was that the ascending origin tier elite did not resist, and only channeled regulations to protect himself. In that case, after Ling Han spent a horribly long time, he would be able to slowly disintegrate these regulations and then kill the ascending origin tier elite. This was only a theoretical possibility. Whether it was replenishing the ascending origin tier's regulations for defense or a casual strike, it was enough to turn all of Ling Han's efforts into waste and kill him immediately, but merely this sliver of possibility was already an inconceivable thing. Gods, just what kind of monster was this? Chapter 1874, Strongest Attack. Chapter 1874, Strongest Attack. Under the ice, the movements of the majority of Zhao Qingfeng slowed, and only the original was practically unaffected, continuing to launch his offensive on Ling Han. But without the support of many murderous shadows, the might of this attack was only that. With a strike from Ling Han, Pong, Zhao Qingfeng was sent backwards. Competing with doppelgangers, come then? Ling Han exclaimed lowly, and his life force was unleashed, 3 battle beasts walking out from within his body. Flames turned into the vermilion bird, water took the form of the azure dragon, and lightning became Zhu Li, and they were all immortal beasts of immortal beasts. Comparatively speaking, Zhu Li was considerably smaller. It could not be helped the source power of lightning was not qualified to compete with the 9 heavens flame and shining source water in a contest of source powers. The 3 battle beasts appeared, and instantly roared simultaneously, exuding an aura that could suppress all the heavens for eternity. My gods! On the spectators' seats, someone grabbed their head, shivering uncontrollably. Are these really battle beasts that have been manifested? Why do I feel like they could insta-kill me with a single blow? Me too, someone beside him said in a shaking voice. The moment these 3 battle beasts appeared, at least 99% severing mundane tears trembled, and even emperor tears paled, feeling a humiliation that they could not accept. They couldn't even match these 3 battle beasts. It was enough that they could not match Ling Han. Both he and Zhao Qingfeng were super freaks, but this was only a technique that Ling Han had cast, and they couldn't hold up against even that, which was something they could not accept at all. Finally, Zhao Qingfeng looked serious. He, too, discovered the might of these 3 battle beasts. They were really very strong, and a coldness that made it seem as if he could be killed at any second rose up in him. However, this kind of coldness did not make him afraid in the slightest. On the other hand, he became incredibly excited. When he went berserk, his only wish was to kill, whether the one being killed was another or himself. Of course, as he was alive even now, it would only be others that were killed. Ha 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 ha. He laughed madly, multiple seals of great Tao appearing on his body. His fighting spirit had taken solid form and soared straight into the skies. Materialize, he shouted, and the 99 murderous shadows turned back into murderous aura, which then materialized into a gigantic human figure. Charge! He charged towards Ling Han, while the murderous aura figure met the 3 battle beasts. Boom, boom, boom. By now, the battle was divided into 2 different areas, with Ling Han battling Zhao Qingfeng, while the 3 battle beasts were fighting the murderous aura figure to death. The battles on both sides were incredibly intense. Blood splattered. Even if Ling Han's physique was incredibly tough, it was still inevitable that his skin would be split, but with the toughness of his godly bones, these were only light injuries. Zhao Qingfeng was not much better off. The bronze physique's defenses also had a limit, and after this limit was surpassed, he, too, would suffer injury. The 2 supreme prodigies were both covered with wounds. They had really met a match. It was rare that they could encounter an opponent that could allow them to go all out in battle like this. While they could also go all out in a battle against Dividing Soul Tier, they would not have that feeling of pressure as if they were walking on a tightrope, so that would not have the slightest benefit in improving their battle prowess. I have found your weakness. Zhao Qingfeng bared his mouth in a grin. He delivered a series of stabs, the angle of his strikes incredibly tricky, intending to pierce through the boneless parts of Ling Han's body and damage Ling Han's internal organs. After fighting for so long, he was naturally clear that the toughness of Ling Han's bones was not something that he could breach, but his skin was not as tough as that. As long as he could avoid the bones, he would be able to inflict a fatal injury on Ling Han. Ling Han merely humped. If the divine physique that had been cultivated through the indestructible heaven scroll could be dealt with like that, what right would it have to be ranked above celestial king tier techniques? Wanting to damage his internal organs? Easier said than done. However, his blood and flesh were too heavily damaged, which would also cause a very serious injury to him, and he could not truly ignore it. Ling Han, I am already tired of this, Zhao Qingfeng declared loudly. His bronze-like body exuded a dazzling brilliance, and his fighting spirit and vitality were burning to the pinnacle. This state could not be maintained for long. He needed to immediately kill Ling Han, and then gain his breakthrough amidst the slaughter. Heavens will guillotine, he exclaimed lowly. Boom! His whole person had vanished, and what replaced him was actually a gigantic bronze guillotine. The blade of the guillotine was shockingly his neck, connected to his head. Wang, an indescribable aura rolled out. Ling Han felt as if his whole body had been set rigidly in place, and an indescribable reverence rose up from the depths of his heart. It was as if this guillotine was executing punishment on behalf of the heavens, and he could only accept the punishment without protest. The bronze guillotine flew over whilst Zhao Qingfeng proudly proclaimed, I am heaven's will itself. This was his strongest secret technique, the strongest attack that drew on the divine fetus. No matter how much of a prodigy you were, you ultimately would not be able to escape being sentenced by heaven's will. Your only fate would be death. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared, and instantly swept away all the negative feelings in his heart. However, the might of this guillotine was indeed frightening. It was really possible that it had approached the level of Yang Soul tier. But so what? The guillotine opened and harshly chopped out at Ling Han. Wang, the regulations of the great Tao rippled out, celestial light streaking through. Not good. Lu Xianming immediately stood up. Just now, even if there were defensive formations in place, his spirit had still been influenced by the heavens will guillotine. He actually hadn't reacted at the first instant, and only when the guillotine blade chopped down did he finally come back to his senses. Oh no, Ling Han was dead. His expression was full of bafflement. Someone being capable of fighting a close battle with Zhao Qingfeng, how hard would it be to find this kind of martial arts prodigy? But now, he had actually been eliminated by Zhao Qingfeng. Sighing, he slowly sat back down. Since he had already died, it was only a waste of emotion to think further of him. Meanwhile, Sun Dong yelled out in excitement. He had finally been killed. Now, his A*S could finally be comforted. Chung Fengyun was also incredibly elated. After commenting for so many days, his judgment had finally come true for once, which made him practically weep in joy. Bewitching Maiden Row and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, meanwhile, were despondent. Though cheers rang out like thunder from all around them, they couldn't hear the slightest bit of it. In the end, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was not as confident in Ling Han as the Empress. Otherwise, the Empress would not possibly be worried in the slightest. As the celestial light dispersed, that guillotine blade was still placed at Ling Han's neck, but the strike could not go through at all. They could all see Zhao Qingfeng's face was filled with shock. This had surpassed his imagination. He had drawn on the strongest attack of his divine fetus. It contained a sliver of celestial king tier regulations, and actually still did not manage to sever Ling Han's neck and behead him. This was extremely inconceivable. The cheers in the arena came to an abrupt halt. What was going on here? He didn't die even with that? Not only did he not die, he actually did not spill even the slightest drop of blood. Sun Dong was astounded. Chung Fengyun was shocked, and a feeling of having fallen into a trap rose up in him. Ling Han showed a smile and said, "So this is your strongest move? Nothing impressive." He actively channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. To say nothing of Zhao Qingfeng, even if Yin Xianlu himself was here, even if he was a fifth severance, he could not possibly kill Ling Han. The defense of the present Ling Han was at least at Yin Soul level. You should take a strike from me too, Ling Han stated calmly. The power of the fire divine fetus was unleashed, and boom, boundless flames surged out. It was as if a massive explosion had taken place in the whole arena, making everyone widen their eyes as if they were blind. They could not see anything clearly at all. When the light of the flames washed away, another figure had appeared in the arena. That was an elder that had a tall build, and like an eagle picking up a chicken, he had picked up a person in his hand, and that was Zhao Qingfeng. His limbs were drooping weakly, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Chapter 1875, Breaking Through. Chapter 1875, Breaking Through. However, Ling Han sighed. Zhao Qingfeng was not dead. He had indeed sustained severe injuries, but at the last crucial moment, a powerful figure had interfered and saved him. The elder with a tall build turned to Ling Han and said, "Brat, don't be disappointed. I am saving you here. If you had killed a member of the Eternal Prosperity sect, there would have been no place for you to hide in this whole wide world. You are an elite, so whatever you say." Ling Han bowed slightly and said, "My lord speaks true." In any case, he did not cultivate the regulation of slaughter. He had accumulated boundless appreciation through this battle, and once he had completely digested this, he would have a chance of advancing into the fourth severance. As for Zhao Qingfeng, when he left the city, he would find a chance to kill him. In this battle, Ling Han is victorious, this tall, broad elder announced. This process of turning the tide had happened too quickly, and everyone had a slight difficulty in accepting this turn of events. Wasn't it Zhao Qingfeng who still had the absolute upper hand? Why had he lost all of a sudden? However, since this was personally announced by this powerful figure, who would dare express disagreement? Those who had placed bets all sighed. All of them had placed their bets on Zhao Qingfeng's victory, and the only difference was how many moves it would take. But now the result was so beyond expectations. One could only say that the gamble house had turned over a great profit. Everyone left gradually, and those like Sun Dong and Cheng Fengyun were at a loss. Even now, they had not come back to their senses. Why was it Ling Han that had one? Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden finally released the breath that she was holding. She could feel that her whole body was covered with sweat, her face astonishingly pale. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Ro humphed. This damn man was clearly very strong, yet caused her to worry so long for nothing. He really was despicable. Ling Han left, yet he had just barely walked out when he was met with a familiar face. "Brother Ling, I never thought I would actually see you here." Lu Xianming laughed loudly. Sun Dong, who was following behind him, shivered in fear. Only now did he realize what a big mistake he had previously made. As it turned out, Lu Xianming and Ling Han knew each other. No wonder Lu Xianming would be displeased about him, and the crux of the matter lay here. His heart clenched, and he instantly thought of a measure to make up for it. He hurriedly shot out quickly, bowed deeply towards Ling Han, and said, "Brother Ling, I have previously offended you greatly. That was out of my own foolishness, and I hope Brother Ling would forgive me." A sliver of a smile flashed across Lu Xianming's face. This subordinate was not too bad. He had taken the initiative to admit his error and had given Ling Han enough face. Lu Xianming was sure that Ling Han would be very pleased. Ling Han, on the other hand, did not think too much of it. Sun Dong had come to provoke him, and he had punished the former for it too, so he had long since forgotten about it unless Sun Dong did something again. Ling Han thus waved a hand dismissively and said, "I have already forgotten." Forgotten? Forgotten naturally meant that it was all water under the bridge. Only now did Sun Dong sigh in relief. He stole a glance at Lu Xianming, and seeing a smile appear on the latter's face, he knew that he had done the right thing. "Brother Lu." Ling Han also raised his clasped hands in greeting towards Lu Xianming. "Come, let's continue the conversation after we return," Lu Xianming said smilingly. "There's no rush. I still have a companion," Ling Han replied with a smile. "Yo, just one? Then what about me?" Bewitching Maiden Ro walked over with swaying hips, and even if Lu Xianming had strong self-control against feminine charms, he couldn't help but look stunned. Even less needed to be said about Sun Dong. He had a fondness for women, so how could he possibly resist bewitching Maiden Ro's charms? Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden stood beside Bewitching Maiden Row, and immediately paled in comparison. As far as Ling Han knew, there were only two others that could emerge superior over Bewitching Maiden Ruth Empress and Hun Yo. Ling Han sighed. What are you playing at, you witch? Are you really planning to deliver the 9 revolutions charm physique for my cultivation? Heh, since you are Brother Ling's friends, then let's go together, Lu Xieming said with a smile, though light flickered in the gaze he directed at Bewitching Maiden Row. He had the confidence to capture this seductive witch for himself. Who was he? A young master of Alchemy City, and very soon he would advance, and would become the future master of Alchemy City. And that was still not enough to make this delicate woman throw herself into his arms? Ling Han? Ling Han was indeed very strong, but this was Alchemy City. No matter how strong you were, you would only be a hired thug. Moreover, just how far was the severing mundane tier from ascending origin tier? At least in the future billions and billions of years, Ling Han only had potential. Hearing Lu Xieming say thus, Ling Han could not refuse either. He only beckoned Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden over and wrapped an arm around her slender waist, which calmed Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's heart greatly. There were thousands of years of affection between herself and Ling Han. Lu Xieming saw this, and naturally was even more certain in his heart. Though he did not know why Ling Han was not interested in Bewitching Maiden Row, what did that have to do with him? The group arrived at Lu Xieming's courtyard, and arrangements for the accommodations of Ling Han and his group were made first. Then, everyone sat in the center of a garden, with fine wines served to them. Sipping wine, they conversed idly. Lu Xieming's main focus was naturally recruiting Ling Han, but he did not have any position to do so at present. You see, he had first wanted to save Ling Han, yet had missed the chance, leading to the situation now in which he still owed Ling Han his life. How could he bring himself to speak of recruitment? Then they'd just start from being friends. He was the holy son of Alchemy City, and with his invitation, Lu Xieming naturally did not need to be concerned about the rules of the 4th level. Ling Han could stay however many days he wanted as long as Lu Xieming did not throw him out. On the 2nd day, the Tao-regulating pill was delivered. Ling Han did not consume it, but rather handed it over to the Empress. There were really too many treasures he had. Even the majority of celestial kings would be bloodshot with envy about the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water. In comparison, the Empress's foundations were much weaker. And they had also been gained with the support of Small Tower. By now, only precious treasures like the heavenly Tao Jade could be of any help to Ling Han. The Tao-regulating pill was really not enough. In the case of the heavenly Tao Jade, he could only refine it after he had reached about the 4th severance peak stage. Otherwise, it would only make up for the shortcomings in his previous path of cultivation, but could not help one to attempt the 5th severance. The Empress naturally would not be reserved with Ling Han. Initially, she still needed some time to break through to the 4th severance, but with the Tao-regulating pill, she would definitely be able to break through in a shorter period of time. Ling Han was the same. He had really gained much from his battle with Zhao Qingfeng, and he himself had reached the 3rd severance peak stage. After this battle, he had reached a state of perfection, and immediately entered into seclusion to begin his breakthrough to the 4th severance. This disappointed Lu Xieming slightly. He was still hoping to form amicable relations with Ling Han. In his eyes, attempting the 4th severance was definitely something that would take a long time, and without over 10,000 years, one shouldn't even think of succeeding. Never mind. Their lifespan was unlimited now, so if he had to wait 10,000 years, then so be it. Inside the Black Tower, Ling Han sat down cross-legged underneath the reincarnation tree. The 4th severance was already within sight, and he only had to complete the final dash. The battle with Zhao Qingfeng continuously flashed through his mind, and Ling Han picked out the shortcomings that he had observed. All these needed to be improved on, and the experience that came from battle caused him to rise to a higher level. Underneath the reincarnation tree, one day was equivalent to 100 years. Even if Ling Han had already seen hope, he had still stayed in the Black Tower for a whole 2 months, and only then did he finally sense the turning point for his breakthrough. When he stood up, the Empress, too, opened her eyes. Her breakthrough was similarly in sight. The two of them exited the Black Tower, their figures stepping on air and arriving at a desolate mountain. Then, they released their auras. Suddenly, tribulation clouds rolled out, enshrouding the air above them respectively, which was incredibly frightening. Fuck. Is there something wrong with you people? At this moment, a naked Mad suddenly popped out of the wilderness. As he stopped in fury, he rapidly threw on some clothing, and there were actually two other women beside him. They similarly were quickly putting on their clothes. They just happened to be having a romp in the wild. Chapter 1876, Pill Concoction Again. Chapter 1876, Pill Concoction Again. Shimonda felt very depressed. By nature, he was wanton and unrestrained, and today, on a whim, he had brought two of his paramours to this wild mountainous area. With the skies as their blanket and the earth as their bed, he planned to have a completely unreserved party of three. In the end, they had yet to begin when tribulation clouds had come all of a sudden. Someone was enduring a heavenly tribulation. Ordinarily speaking, the heavens had good eyes, and as long as you did not actively interfere, the divine lightning would not strike you even if you were close at hand. But after the divine lightning descended, what would happen to the shock waves that were created in the process was not within the heavens' range of consideration. Thus, when someone was experiencing the heavenly tribulation, it was still best to avoid them as much as possible. Unless it was a severing mundane tear enduring the heavenly tribulation, and you yourself were a dividing soul tear, then you couldn't just boldly stand within the scope of the heavenly tribulation. The aftermath that was generated could not possibly cause much damage to you only then. The problem here was that both Ling Han and the Empress were existences that were close to the monarch tier, and they were experiencing the heavenly tribulation for fourth severance, which was astonishingly terrifying. Shimonda naturally could only hurriedly pull his two female companions along and flee in a panic. Fuck, are you people doing it on purpose? When he had reached a safe area, Shimonda couldn't help but point at the skies and curse. Wasn't I just indulging myself in a bout of public S***? Do you guys have to cause trouble to me like this? However, when his eyes glimpsed the Empress, a stunned expression instantly appeared on his face. Fuck, how could there be such a beautiful woman? Young master. The two beautiful women both played coy, patting their bountiful breasts and looking as if they had not regained their wits from the terrible scare and needed him to soothe their fears. If this had been any other time, Shimonda would definitely have gone nearer with a perverted expression, but at present, he did not have the slightest bit of interest. He carelessly pushed the two women to one side, his eyes fixed on the Empress while shining with a light that made him look like a hungry wolf. This guy. Finally, he had spotted Ling Han and couldn't help but experience a shock. It's the guy that defeated Zhao Qingfeng. Immediately, he felt a cold chill rise up from the soles of his feet, and in an instant, all his lecherous intent was erased without a trace. The Shimen clan was very strong, and had an immortal palace tier ancestor keeping watch. In alchemy, they could also be considered a respected clan, but it was only that. They had not reached the extent of having a critical role. However, it was rumored that a considerable number of powerful figures had already expressed interest in Ling Han, wanting to take him as disciple, son-in-law, or something of the like. In short, Ling Han was very popular now, overwhelmingly and outrageously popular. To offend Ling Han at this point in time was really a very unwise action. Shimonda might be a pervert, but he was no idiot. Our Shimen clan, too, wants to recruit this man, but has completely no way to contest with those mighty figures, Shimonda thought. However, he could be considered as having incurred a debt to me with this, so I could use this opportunity to befriend him. You should not covet the wives of your friends. Shimonda was well aware of this principle. Though he was lecherous, even robbers had their principles. He was definitely not going to steal his friend's wife, and all his friends were well aware of that. He would just sit by and watch as Ling Han and the Empress endured the heavenly tribulation, and when they were done, he would immediately approach and worm his way into befriending them. But as he watched, his expression slowly changed. This was the heavenly tribulation for fourth severance. Did they think he had never endured the fourth severance? When he endured the heavenly tribulation for the fourth severance, it did not even have a 100th of the power behind this. No, no, no. It was not only a 100th, it did not even have a 10,000th of the might of this heavenly tribulation. As expected of the man that had defeated Zhao Qingfeng. Hold on, Ling Han being so strong was one thing. But why was the heavenly tribulation for this beauty also so terrifying? Realization suddenly dawned on him. The heavenly tribulation was actually the best reflection of one's strength. The stronger the heavenly tribulation, the higher one's strength was. That was why the heavens would increase the might of the heavenly tribulation to temper them as appropriate. Monsters, two monsters. This kind of woman was absolutely no one that he could covet. Shimende immediately made up his mind and did not dare to have any further ideas about the Empress. Half a day later, the heavenly tribulation had passed, the tribulation clouds dispersed, and both Ling Han and the Empress descended onto the ground, exchanging a smile with each other. Ling Han had greater gains. He had tempered his physique again and truly reached the height of 3-star pseudo-divine metal. By now, while his battle prowess had still not reached the level of Yang Soul Tier, it was already very, very difficult for Yang Soul Tiers to kill him. Even if they were to refine him through regulations, that would need years to accomplish. If he faced Zhao Qingfeng now, a confident smile appeared on Ling Han's face. Within 100 moves, he would definitely be able to kill him. Not defeat, but rather kill. Ling Han looked toward Shimende, smiled, and said, "Friend, apologies. I thought there was no one here." It's fine. In any case, I was not injured, either." Shimende grinned brightly. "I've yet to congratulate young Master Ling for advancing to the fourth severance. Becoming a dividing soul tier will be just around the corner." Ling Han was slightly surprised and asked, "You know me?" By now, who would not know of young Master Ling in Alchemy City? Shimende asked. This naturally was an exaggeration, but flattery was always pleasant, so these words of flattery still made Ling Han considerably pleased. At least, the Empress was very pleased. No matter how others flattered her, respected her, or feared her, she would take it all as a matter of course, but if it was flattering Ling Han, she would be elated. Ling Han chuckled. He naturally would not become smug and conceited, and treat this person as a close friend just because of a few flattering words. "Young Master Ling, why don't you come and visit my humble abode, so I could host a celebratory feast in your honor?" Shimende took the chance to offer an invitation. Ling Han shook his head and replied, "No need. I have other business." He paused, and thinking that he had indeed almost caused the heavenly tribulation to implicate these three people, he said, "I am presently staying at Lu Xianming's place. If you're free, you can come and pay a visit." Good. Shimende was just feeling a little disappointed, but when he heard the last few words, he was naturally overjoyed and nodded hurriedly. Ling Han directed a smile at the other, and holding the Empress's slender hand, he returned to Lu Xianming's place. When Lu Xianming knew that Ling Han had come out of seclusion, he couldn't help but feel pleasantly surprised. He had thought he would have to wait over 10,000 years at first, and when he discovered that Ling Han had actually successfully broken through to the fourth severance, he was incredibly astounded. It had just been 2 months, and Ling Han had actually broken through. He really was a freak. Lu Xianming could not help but feel impressed. It was no wonder that Ling Han could defeat Zhao Qingfeng. His talent in martial arts was really awesome to the extreme. Thankfully, he himself was an alchemist, and no matter how outstanding Ling Han was, he could not possibly threaten his position. Lu Xianming wanted to celebrate Ling Han's feat, but was met with Ling Han's tactful refusal. The latter went out to look for a time cultivation chamber. He wanted to become a celestial-level alchemist in the shortest period of time possible. Initially, there were a great many higher-ups that wanted to recruit him, but he had just come out of seclusion and then entered into seclusion again. It could not be helped. These people could only wait, which also caused some powerful figures to become angered. "You are but a mere severing mundane tier, so don't you think you are being too arrogant?" But when they found out that Ling Han had broken through to the fourth severance, the anger of these mighty figures all disappeared without a trace. Prodigy. He was really too genius. Immediately, they made adjustments to their previous plans and brought out more sincere conditions to recruit Ling Han. For the moment, Ling Han did not know of these matters. He was inside the time cultivation chamber, tirelessly working on pill concoction. On the fourth level, the acceleration effects had improved from 20 times to 30 times, but the price was also enough to strike one dumbfounded. The acceleration of 30 times shockingly needed 30,000 star stones for a single day, and this was also why people from the first level could come here, but there would not be many at all who could take out enough star stones to stay here for a day. Ling Han swept an eye over the Black Tower and paid for 10 days. 10 days, after acceleration, would mean 300 days, which was enough for him to concoct his first cauldron of celestial pills. He began to concoct pills and failed a few times consecutively. When it had reached the 5th day in the outside world, which was also over 150 days later in the cultivation chamber, he finally entered into a prime condition. The success of his first cauldron of celestial pills was close at hand. He suddenly humphed lowly, a strong shiver overcoming his whole body. All of a sudden, he collapsed onto the ground. Pong! The cauldron went out of control and exploded immediately. Chapter 1877. The Curse Activates. Chapter 1877. The Curse Activates. Multiple veins popped out on Ling Han's forehead. He felt incredible agony take over his whole body. The black, murderous curse had activated. It would activate once a year. Though the normal time had not passed, Ling Han had spent a considerable amount of time inside the time cultivation chamber, and added with that time, the time limit of a year was already reached. Because he himself had not expected it either, he was caught completely off guard. Ling Han directly lost all control, leading to the explosion of the cauldron. Now, he was not in the mood to bother about that. He could only curl up on the ground, resisting that indescribable agony. Old Demon Blood Shadow was so sure that Ling Han would obediently work for him, and naturally there was a reason for it. That was because this pain was really incredibly piercingly agonizing, surpassing everything Ling Han had experienced before. Ling Han gritted his teeth and worked hard on resisting it. He had powerful determination and did not submit under this kind of agonizing pain. Instead, he sat up in a cross-legged position, resisting the black, murderous curse head-on. Not only was he going to become a monarch tier, he was also going to be an invincible overlord of all monarch tiers. Thus, he had to reach absolute perfection in every single aspect. Natural talent, determination, and effort, not a single one was dispensable. Multiple black veined patterns appeared on his body. That was the black murderous curse activating and wreaking havoc in Ling Han's body. There was one thing that the old demon Blood Shadow had lied to Ling Han about. When the black murderous curse activated completely, the pain that Ling Han endured would only reach this extent. However, the moment it activated, it would not stop, but would rather torment Ling Han for as long as 10,000 years, and only then would it end his life. He said that when it truly activated, it would be 10,000 times worse, but that was only a mere threat for Ling Han so that he would do the job as best as he could. Droplets of cold sweat poured down Ling Han's forehead, but aside from the beginning when he was completely unprepared and released a yell of pain, he did not let out a single sound further. He gritted his teeth tightly and observed the channeling of the black, murderous curse. It should be known that this was something planted by an ascending origin tier elite, and it was unavoidable that it contained his Tao. However, one could not possibly observe it usually. He would have long since been driven to screaming out in pain under the agonizing torment. How could he possibly bother to take notice of this? Ling Han had strong determination. He was observing the channeling of the black murderous curse. Then, as long as his strength had reached a certain extent, he would be able to dispel this black murderous curse by himself. If he could avoid dying once, he naturally did not wish to die. This kind of torment lasted for a total of a whole day and night. Ling Han wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead and felt that all his clothes had been dampened with sweat. His spirit was very worn out, but the toughness of his spirit had strengthened slightly. A sliver of a smile appeared on his face. The old demon Blood Shadow would never have imagined that not only would this black murderous curse not become a seal that pushed him to death, it would instead have the effect of tempering his spirit. However, Ling Han did not have the slightest intention of thanking this old bastard. Once he had enough strength, he would definitely take off this old bastard's head. He rested for a dozen over days, and only then did he dust himself off and continued pill concoction. With the acceleration of time, 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Han's expression was slightly excited, and with a sudden shout, "Pa, pa, pa," he delivered 3 consecutive palm strikes on the alchemy cauldron. The cauldron instantly shattered, but it was not an explosion due to failure this time. It had truly been destroyed by Ling Han's assault. 3 alchemical pills floated in the air. It was as if they had sprouted wings as they flew around in the air, but because this was a closed-off space, they could not possibly escape no matter what. Ling Han laughed, and stretching a hand to grab at the empty air, he made the 3 pills fall into the palm of his hand. Pills completed. They were Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pills, a type of 1-star celestial pill. It was used by severing mundane tears, having the effect of suppressing one's spirit. During cultivation, cultivators would be comprehending Great Tao, but Great Tao was boundless, so how could it be so easily analyzed? It was very possible that the tables would be turned, causing the cultivator to lose himself within Great Tao. This Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pill would then be able to suppress one's spirit so he would not lose himself. The ratio of celestial medicines used was different, and the Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pill also had different grades due to the difference in skill of the alchemist, which were low grade, medium grade, high grade, and peak grade, respectively. These 3 Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pills of mine should be capable of belonging to the medium grade, Ling Han assessed. This was not being modest or boastful, as that was indeed the case. Being able to reach the medium grade with my first successful concoction, I am indeed awesome. This time, he was slightly proud of himself. However, this was actually Ling Han's second successful concoction. The first time he had been about to succeed, he had experienced this sudden assault from the black murderous curse, but the experience he should have accumulated he had still accumulated. Furthermore, his spirit had also become stronger this time round. Thus, the moment he succeeded in his concoction, it was medium grade. There was a reason for it. Ling Han used his divine sense like a blade and emblazoned Han on the alchemical pills. Every alchemist would inscribe a unique seal on creations they were proud of. Though this could not be considered a creation that Ling Han was proud of, it was still the first cauldron of celestial pills he had concocted, and he really had spent a very, very long time on it. This was worth remembering. Because he had not reached the time of 10 days, Ling Han simply chose to concoct another cauldron of Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pills. However, the grade did not increase and reach high grade this time. It was still medium grade. Even if he was the Alchemy Emperor, he could not ascend the heavens with a single step. He exited the cultivation chamber and returned to Lu Xinming's place. At this time, at least over a dozen forces sent representatives, and they were waiting for him. Some wanted to take him as a disciple, while some wanted to take him as a son-in-law. In short, they had all shown their greatest sincerity to make him one of their own. As usual, Ling Han refused them all. What a joke! Wasn't this looking down on him? His target was becoming the future master of this alchemy city. Seeing Ling Han refuse the others one after another, Lu Xinming thought that Ling Han had done so for his sake, so he was naturally extremely pleased. Ling Han made his queries. To become an alchemist of Alchemy City, he had to undergo a test at the Alchemist Pavilion. The first step was becoming a junior apprentice, and then a middle-level apprentice, and then a high-level apprentice, and then only would he be qualified to be tested as an alchemist. The requirement for a high-level apprentice was being able to concoct level 20 divine pills, and above that was a 1-star alchemist, which was reasonable. Ling Han gave an O. Actually, he was able to become a high-level apprentice right from the very beginning, but only thought that he would be able to open the great doors of Alchemy City by becoming a one-star alchemist. He had really thought too much. But that was fine. By now, he could directly emerge as a one-star alchemist, which was even more awesome. He went off to the Alchemist Pavilion to undergo the test. This time, he had really kept a low profile, focusing completely on gaining the status of an alchemist. Thus, he did not even ask the Empress and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to accompany him. You see, if he would still attract trouble like that, then it really was not his fault. He did not delay the slightest on his journey. Ling Han soon arrived at the Alchemist Pavilion. It was an incredibly majestic and austere pavilion, occupying as many as 10,000 fields, and was indescribably tall and towering. This was the landmark of Alchemy City, or at least one of them. The truly majestic Alchemist Pavilion was at the 5th level, which was 100 times grander than the 4th level. Ling Han stood, raising his head to study it. As he ascended, there were as many as 300 meters of steps alone, and they were all paved with high-grade jade, exuding a faint luster. Ling Han, a voice rang out, and there was a young man standing on the steps. He was looking down on Ling Han loftily, and when he saw that Ling Han had glimpsed him, he descended the steps. I am Okansas. Okan, one of the holy sons of Alchemy City. Clearly, he was deliberately waiting for Ling Han here. But why? Chapter 1878. Holy Son, Okansas. Chapter 1878. Holy Son, Okansas. Ling Han smiled faintly and asked, How can I help you, Holy Son O? Okan had already descended the stairs with a few steps and walked to Ling Han's side. He bared his mouth in a grin, 2 rows of teeth white and neat, as he said, You are truly a busy person. It really is difficult to even meet you. Ling Han only chuckled in response. This Okan put on a pretense as if they were old friends, but he was not even familiar with him. To say nothing of being familiar with him, he was not familiar with Lu Xianming, even. It was just that the latter was very cordial, and added with the fact that Ling Han had also saved him before, he had thus accepted his invitation. His divine sense was sensitive, and discovered that there were at least 4 individual divine senses locked on him. But they were only at the severing mundane tiers level, so he naturally was completely fearless. They should belong to Okan's guards. He himself was only in the severing mundane tier. An alchemist did not need to have a high cultivation level, because the requirement for concocting celestial pills was only the severing mundane tier. If they could advance into this level, then they would be able to concoct even celestial pills. But in truth, because their divine sense was not strong enough, it was practically an impossible feat for a severing mundane tier to concoct a * celestial pill. At least, a miracle like that had yet to happen. Ordinarily, a severing mundane tier could concoct 2-star celestial pills at most, while dividing soul tier could concoct 3-star pills, only a level higher than themselves. And also because of that, when Alchemy City chose its heirs, there was no need for cultivation level to become the largest factor of consideration. It was fine as long as they could advance into the severing mundane tier. With oceans of alchemical pills bombarding them without any care for the expense, advancing to the ascending origin tier was no mere dream. Of course, being capable of becoming high-grade alchemists, how could they themselves possibly be any idiots? Thus, the chairperson of Alchemy City ordinarily would possess the cultivation level of the ascending origin tier, but this battle prowess was possibly the weakest in the ascending origin tier. Even if they reached consummate level, they would only possess the standard of great accomplishment. Whatever the case, because Okan's cultivation level was not high, and furthermore, they were in Alchemy City, the only people he could mobilize would only be at the severing mundane tier. Ling Han, are you interested in working for me? Okan saw Ling Han was expressionless and did not beat around the bush, getting straight to the point. Ling Han shook his head and very crisply answered, No. Okan's expression looked a little ugly after having been rebuffed like this. For a holy son like himself, whose status was noble, it was really very difficult to hear others say no to him. Thankfully, his composure control was not too bad, and he immediately suppressed this kind of displeasure. Aren't you going to hear the conditions I offer? He forced out a sliver of a smile. No need. Ling Han shook his head. The other party had probably misunderstood. Ling Han had no intention of working for Lu Xianming at all, and now he was only a guest at the Lu clan. But true, this was Alchemy City where alchemists were revered and respected. Cultivators had their martial arts, and weren't they all wanting to sell themselves to high-grade alchemists, and would thus have no worries of getting a few alchemical pills for their efforts. After advancing to the severing mundane tier, the rate of cultivation would slow down to a snail's pace if a cultivator could not be supported with celestial medicines. They could only advance further by depending on celestial medicines. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, cultivation was actually a contest with time. Otherwise, a few more mortals' tribulations, and they really would be killed if their own strength had not increased. Hence why alchemists had such outstanding status. From a certain aspect, they had grasp over the life of a cultivator. Oken had been rebuffed twice in a row, and his displeasure finally seeped into his expression, and he said, "Ling Han, don't forget yourself. No matter how much of a prodigy you are merely a severing mundane tier, and are not yet qualified to ask for sky-high prices." Ling Han sighed. Why had he encountered yet another idiot? What did he do? Refusing your offer of recruitment means that I am looking down on you, and have forgotten myself and my conceit? Fuck, has he proposed a price? Asking for sky-high prices your sister. How could there be such a person who went off talking on his own? Ling Han's expression also turned cold, and he said, "Step aside, and don't waste my time." Ling Han. Okan's voice rose a few pitches higher. "I know, you are merely waiting for a good offer. I might as well tell you, though Lu Xianming's present situation is indeed superior, us other holy sons and holy daughters are not people to be trifled with either. There are 9 holy sons and holy daughters of Alchemy City, and aside from a few useless pieces of trash, Iou Kanjiaobang and Qin Guyu are all qualified to contest with Lu Xianming. Furthermore, we have already decided to join forces and kick him out of the contest first. You are clinging to a tree that is destined to wilt. Isn't that too stupid?" This was an idiot. "Which year have you heard with, and which I have you seen with that I am going to mix around with Lu Xianming? You can't be that self-opinionated." Ling Han shook his head. He was really worried about the IQ of this person, and he wanted to contest for the position of chairperson like this. Oh, right. Ling Han's own aim was also to become the chairperson of Alchemy City, or at least an heir. Firstly, he could make his name known so he could reach Commander Guan, and secondly, he was fond of alchemy in the first place, and was of a mind to develop himself here. Going by that logic, whether it was this Okan or Lu Xianming, they were actually all his competitors. Ling Han scratched his head. Previously, he had not taken this problem into consideration. As the Alchemy Emperor, he was too confident in himself in the area of alchemy. With all others being mediocre, there really were none that he took seriously. Thus, he had never taken Lu Xianming and the other 9 holy sons and holy daughters to heart and considered them his rivals. It was just like when the Lion King ascended the throne. Would he have to be concerned about a few lambs that he had passed on his way? Ling Han broke into a grin. Since Okan was also a competitor, then there was no harm in playing around with him and striking a blow to his pride. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. Okan instantly bore an expression of pride. See, he only had to reveal his trump card slightly, and this brat had cowered as expected. Just playing up to those in power. This was also his twisted logic. If you did not listen to me, then you had forgotten yourself in your conceit. If you listened, you were merely playing up to those in power. In any case, it was still he who was in a lofty position, and everything was up to him to decide. I will give you 2 choices. The first is an inferior plan, and that is to leave Lu Xianming and get out of Alchemy City. The second is a superior option, and that is to come under my banner, and I will take you to the pinnacle of your life. Ling Han almost spluttered in laughter. Why don't you just go ahead and say that you will allow me to show off and fly? He shook his head and said, I choose the third option. What third option? There was no third option. Okan's expression cooled, and he said, Oh, you want to add on a condition? Fine then, go ahead and say it. Ling Han smiled and said, I'll be the boss, and you holy sons and holy daughters should all come and bow down to me." By the look of things now, this was a joke, but only Ling Han was filled with confidence. In future, he was to become the king of Alchemy City. Then, whether it was Okan, Lu Xianming, or the other holy sons and holy daughters, they would all have to bow down to him as their master. Ha 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 ha. Okan laughed quickly in derision. This time, he had really been angered. A mere severing mundane tear. So what if you were even more of a prodigy? This was Alchemy City. Ling Han ascended the steps and said, "Step aside." At first, Okan wanted to make a move, but thinking of Ling Han's terrifying strength, the hand that he had raised slightly immediately lowered. If he did make a move, he would only be asking for his own humiliation. Furthermore, he would be shamed if he, a noble holy son, was to be beaten. He humphed and followed Ling Han with a wave of his sleeve. "Ling Han, then I'll just let you see what kind of power the holy son of Alchemy City has. You want to buy alchemical pills? Hee, without my agreement, just see who would dare sell anything to you." He deserved to be a holy son even with such narrow-mindedness. Ling Han shook his head internally. In comparison, Lu Xianming was indeed considerably stronger. It was no wonder he was the most popular. However, his intention was not to buy alchemical pills in the first place. If you continue to think so highly of yourself, aren't you afraid that you would fly into rage out of humiliation later? Speaking of rage out of humiliation, Ling Han involuntarily smiled. Then, he'd just play around with this guy. Chapter 1879, Causing Trouble. Chapter 1879, Causing Trouble. Not only was the Alchemist Pavilion the place to authenticate alchemists and alchemist trainees, it was also the largest pharmacy of every level that sold alchemical pills. How could Okan possibly think that Ling Han was here to take the test for alchemists? In his eyes, he had to have come to buy celestial pills. As a holy son, Okan had special privileges. If he couldn't even decide who could buy the alchemical pills, this title would really be too useless. Ling Han ignored him and continued on ahead, his speed very fast. Okan hurriedly set off in pursuit with large strides. As he saw it, Ling Han wanted to throw him off his tail and then go to purchase alchemical pills. Tui, in his dreams. Behind him, 4 guards appeared and followed closely behind. The distance of a few hundred meters was nothing to a severing mundane tear. Though there were protective formations here, which largely restricted the speed of traveling, that was only a few breaths' time. Ling Han thus entered into the great pavilion. The first floor of this great pavilion sold alchemical pills. Multiple pill drawers were lined up, and there was no end in sight. Furthermore, they were rows upon rows, and their exact number was unknown. Even in a Celestial King tier-level force, it was still mortals below severing mundane tier that were the majority, and Alchemy City was naturally no exception, either. Thus, the majority of alchemical pills here were sold to mortals, and the largest number was targeted at immortal level. There were also very few that were meant for the Shattering Void tier and below. That was because citizens of the Celestial Realm were born powerful. The majority was already in the Shattering Void tier by birth, so would there still be any need for alchemical pills for Spiritual Ocean tier or Heaven tier? Ling Han began to walk around. A Celestial had a limitless lifespan. At least it was fine to waste 1 or 2 days' time. Okan followed him all the way, and wherever they went, the attendants behind the pill cabinets would pay their respects to him. A holy son was high and noble. A hint of pride appeared on Okan's face. The previous blow that had wounded his confidence was currently recovering. "See, that is how awesome and amazing I am." Ling Han deliberately stopped and asked for the pricing of the alchemical pills. Okan stood behind him and directly said, "No sale." The attendant showed a troubled expression. What logic was there to pushing customers out the door in a business? But this holy son had already spoken, and no matter how brave he was, he did not dare go against his will. "Customer, many apologies. This pill is not for sale," he said with slight anxiety, fearing that he would lose his job, but what he feared more was that Ling Han would hold a grudge against him. After all, he was only in the heavenly body tier. Ling Han chucked, and continued on walking ahead. Whatever pill that he stopped to ask about the price of, the vendors all directly told him it was not for sale under Okan's overbearing pressure. After walking around for a good while, Ling Han indeed could not possibly purchase a single alchemical pill. How about it? Do you now know the consequences of going against my will? Okan asked proudly, and then his tone turned cold. Furthermore, though Alchemy City forbids murder, do you know that some people could possibly disappear inexplicably? I heard you have 2 beautiful wives too. TSK, TSK. You can't be hoping to make them into widows, right? Women are really too unreliable. Possibly not even grass has sprouted on your grave, and they are already playing coy in the arms of another man. These words were very malicious and filled with threat. Instantly, Ling Han's expression darkened. If you want to play around, I'll play with you, but you actually direct the spearhead at my wives. Ling Han could not tolerate that. Who do you fuck think you are? Ling Han turned around abruptly. Pa! He grabbed Okan's collar and picked him up. Though the latter was a peak stage 4th Severance King tier, in front of Ling Han, he couldn't even fight back in the slightest. This was completely one-sided suppression. If you are so determined to seek death, fine, I'll oblige you. Ling Han patted Okan's face with his palm. Just hold on. If I don't kill you, then my name isn't Ling Han. Very quickly, he released his hold. This was the Alchemist Pavilion, and if he made a move on an alchemist, especially one that was a holy son, that would be too unwise. Okan still shivered in fear. That previous look in Ling Han's eyes possessed a very frightening aura, causing his heart to feel lingering fear. Even now, he had not regained his composure, but he immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. In Alchemy City, in the Alchemist Pavilion, Ling Han actually dared to threaten him. This was his territory. How dare you? He was so furious it felt like his chest was close to bursting. However, while Ling Han had indeed picked him up just now, he did not make any further more, so he could not flare up. Firstly, it would make him seem too narrow-minded, and secondly, Ling Han's reputation was not weak at all in recent times. If he could not take hold of Ling Han's weakness and use it to compel him to join him, then he definitely would be targeted by Lu Xianming and pay an exorbitant price. His face was livid. Do you really think that I can't do anything to you? Okan quickly set off after him. He had already made up his mind. Today, he would not let Ling Han buy a single alchemical pill, even if it was the very lowest grade of alchemical pill. And after today, he would send out assassins to get rid of Ling Han. Just like he had said, in Alchemy City, some people could possibly disappear for no reason. As long as no bodies were discovered, who could say for sure that they had died? Ling Han walked to the end of this great pavilion and was immediately halted. Visitors stop here. From the 2nd floor onwards, it is not open to visitors. A guard immediately lowered the long spear in his hands, blocking Ling Han's way forwards. Okan crossed his arms over his chest behind him, watching coldly. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I want to undergo the test for alchemists. Pooh. Immediately, Okan spluttered, the expression on his face indescribably strange. You want to take the test for alchemists? You have got to be joking, right? You are just a prodigy of martial arts. Could it be that you think that you are an all-round prodigy? The guard faltered slightly. Going by the rules of Alchemist Pavilion, this was indeed allowed. He said, then, please wait. Allow me to make a report. He had a sound transmission stone, which could allow for instant communication across a short distance. Of course, this short distance was referring to the whole space of the 4th level of Alchemy City. After a while, a young man that looked like an alchemy apprentice walked out through the passage. When he saw Ling Han, he calmly asked, So you are the one that would like to be authenticated as an alchemist? That's right. Ling Han nodded. Lord Holy Son. This alchemy apprentice had just discovered Okan's presence and quickly paid his respects. Okan waved him off dismissively, indicating that the other needed not have any reservations. This alchemy apprentice thought that Ling Han was deliberately brought over by Okan, and the prideful expression on his face immediately disappeared. He cordially said to Ling Han, Are you already a high-grade trainee now? No. Ling Han shook his head. Then, a middle-grade trainee? No. Beginner trainee? No. After asking for 3 times consecutively and getting 3 negative answers in a row, the alchemy apprentice couldn't help but grit his teeth. Then where did you get the pride to actually declare that you want to take the test for alchemists? According to the rules, the test must begin from the lowest grade of trainee. Only high-grade trainees can test for the status of alchemist, this alchemy apprentice said carefully, fearing that he would anger Kansas. Fine. Ling Han nodded. It was only a matter that would take more twists and turns simple enough. Okan merely smirked coldly by the side, but did not correct him. He wanted to have Ling Han be praised here, praised so much to a lofty position, and then he would kick him off the pedestal with a single move so that he would be completely shamed. The alchemy apprentice led Ling Han to the second floor, and then began the procedure for testing. Because the first step was only becoming a beginner trainee, there was only a middle-grade trainee as witness. Greetings, Lord Holy Sun. That middle-grade trainee hurriedly paid his greetings when he saw Kansas. He immediately understood. Ling Han had to have a powerful background as he was qualified to have Okan accompany him. Even if he was as stupid as a pig, he would be lenient and allow him to pass. After all, it was only a beginner trainee. There would not be any investigations done. Have him concoct the green rainbow pill, Okan suddenly spoke up. Ah. That middle-grade trainee was instantly shocked. That was because the green rainbow pill was the hardest to concoct among beginner-grade alchemical pills. In fact, it could be compared to middle-grade alchemical pills. Chapter 1880, Alchemist Test. Chapter 1880, Alchemist Test. Hadn't you come here to show support? The middle-grade trainee couldn't understand. Why had he now come around to demand that Ling Han concoct the alchemical pill of the highest level of difficulty? But now that the Lord Holy Sun had spoken, did he dare raise any doubt? He did not even dare to ask the reason, and directly said to Ling Han, "Then you just concoct the green rainbow pill." Who knows, it may be that he is specialized in concocting this one. Ling Han nodded indifferently. They came to an alchemy chamber. Ling Han gave his name, and then entered, beginning his path of ascension in alchemy in the celestial realm. Okan sneered. He wanted to show Ling Han that with his help, it would not be any difficult matter for him to get the position of a low-grade alchemy trainee, or even the highest-grade alchemy trainee, but if he was angered? Humph. In the alchemy chamber, Ling Han had already begun. He started from separately picking out the medicinal ingredients, extracting essence, opening the cauldron, and starting the fire, all done smoothly. Amazing! The middle-grade trainee couldn't help but praise. One would know with just a comparison. He at least was inferior to Ling Han in these techniques. They were pleasing to see. This was practically a feast for the eyes. Okan was also shocked. As it turned out, Ling Han really knew how to concoct alchemical pills. At first, he had thought Ling Han had just been infuriated by his actions, and had thus blurted out he wanted to take the alchemist test, but it seemed like that was not the case. Hiss, could it be that he had not come to buy alchemical pills from the start? True, Lu Xianming should have a very high opinion of this guy. Then, no matter what alchemical pills Ling Han wanted, Lu Xianming would be able to provide them for him. What need was there for Ling Han to personally come to this place? But there was no perfect being in this world. Everyone had limited energy. Furthermore, Ling Han was far from reaching the pinnacle of cultivation, so how could he possibly have additional time to spend on alchemy? How had he gained all these abilities? An all-round prodigy? I don't believe it. However, whether Okan believed it or not, in any case, Ling Han had already entered into a brilliant state. Only after less than half a day, a cauldron of green rainbow pills was successfully concocted. They naturally were of the highest grade. Passed. The middle-grade trainee's expression was filled with admiration. It was no wonder that this person could be personally accompanied by Kansas. No wonder he could concoct the green rainbow pills which were of the highest difficulty level. He did indeed have that ability. Okan's expression was incredibly dark. This was practically a slap to his face. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Next, I wish to continue testing for a middle-grade trainee." The middle-grade trainee was not qualified to hold the position of witness further. He immediately went off to make a report, and then 3 high-grade trainees came. "Greetings, Holy Son." They first paid their respects to Kansas. Oken waved them off. At present, he, too, was slightly curious where Ling Han's limits were. "Then concoct the Heaven and Earth Unity pill," he spoke up. The 3 high-grade trainees froze at the same time. The Heaven and Earth Unity pill had belonged to the category of high-grade alchemical pills a very, very long time ago. However, afterwards, due to certain reasons, it was again categorized as a middle-grade alchemical pill, but this was enough proof of the difficulty level of this alchemical pill. Ling Han was testing for a middle-grade trainee, and you directly demanded that he concocted what could practically be considered a high-grade alchemical pill. Wasn't this just making it difficult for him? But they did not dare to say anything. The Lord Holy Son had spoken, so who would dare draw calamity onto themselves? Thus, Ling Han began to concoct the Heaven and Earth Unity pill. The moment he began, these 3 high-grade trainees became enchanted, deeply impressed by Ling Han's movements. This really was a rookie? He was practically a veteran alchemist with how amazingly skilled he was. Passed. After assessing Ling Han's completed pill, the 3 high-grade trainees all gave it a high grade. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "Let's continue with the test for a high-grade trainee." Trainees were trainees. Even if they were of the high grade, they could not possibly alert an alchemist. But the number of witnesses had increased from 3 to 10. Oken did not speak further from the sidelines. He had finally seen the facts. Ling Han indeed had great accomplishments in the area of alchemy. Forget it. What does it matter if you get authenticated as a high-grade trainee? In any case, you wouldn't be able to live for too many days more. Alchemist? What a joke. Even if a high-grade trainee wanted to ascend to this level, without over 100 million years of training, that was absolutely impossible. But looking at Ling Han's flame of life, he couldn't be over 10,000 years old. So how could that be possible? Without Oken exerting pressure from the sidelines, the difficulty level of this test naturally dropped sharply. Ling Han could simply concoct any type of high-grade alchemical pill instead of one specific type. This naturally was just a matter of course for him. The alchemy chamber also had the effects of speeding up time. After merely 1 day, a high-grade alchemical pill was completed. Passed. The 10 high-grade trainees had long since been impressed by Ling Han's skill and showed expressions of admiration without reservations. Their heated and maddened eyes made even Ling Han feel slightly discomfortable. "I'll continue with the test for an alchemist," Ling Han hurriedly said. When these words were spoken, a dead silence fell over the area. "Test for an alchemist? Hiss, you really are so ambitious. Do you know how many alchemists are there even in Alchemy City? 138,643. Though it was over 100,000, how big was Alchemy City? This was a 4-star city, and the population numbered in the millions and millions. Furthermore, these alchemists did not all originate from Alchemy City, but comprised about half the number in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. And even then it was just slightly over 130,000. From this, it was clear how high the requirements were for becoming an alchemist. What alchemist did not work earnestly a few 100 million, billion, or tens of billions of years as a high-grade trainee? Some were still holding the title of high-grade trainee even until death. Furthermore, this was the fate of the very large majority. If that was not the case, how could alchemists possess such a high status? That which was rare was dear, and it was the same for people. From a certain aspect, alchemists were even rarer than exquisitely beautiful women. "What is it? I can't?" Ling Han asked smilingly. "You can take the test, but you will have to concoct celestial pills, which need the use of celestial medicine," a high-grade trainee said. "The pavilion does not provide any celestial medicine. You have to prepare your own." "No problem," Ling Han answered. Seeing how resolute Ling Han was, Oken finally showed a hint of wariness. Could Ling Han really do it? No one was an idiot. If they did not have some amount of certainty, who would come to the alchemist pavilion and fail, be embarrassed, and lose their wealth in public like this? But to say Ling Han possessed the abilities of a one-star alchemist, how could this be believed? The 10 high-grade trainees exchanged looks, and one of them said, "Fine." However, the alchemist test requires an alchemist to invigilate. They were not qualified to authenticate an alchemist. Ling Han nodded. The alchemist test would create a big commotion. Just think about it. How many alchemists were there in the whole Alchemy City? And those that could become alchemists would at least have to be in the severing mundane tier, but throughout such extended passage of time, there were actually only a total number of just over 130,000. Thus, when it was heard that someone was going to undergo the alchemist test, this naturally created a huge commotion. It was possible that this was the rise of a new star. Perhaps this someone was going to become a giant pillar in the future of Alchemy City. Who knew? To say nothing of alchemists being alerted, even a great many cultivation clans sent out representatives to observe the event. A new alchemist was worth recruiting. But when everyone found out that the person that was undergoing the alchemist test was Ling Han, they all had about the same thoughts. You have got to be joking? You are a martial arts prodigy here, the man who has defeated Zhao Qingfeng while you yourself are inferior by one minor level. And now you actually went off to concoct alchemical pills, ignoring your proper occupation? Has your head been kicked by a donkey? It is not that being an alchemist is bad, but you can't put the cart before the horse. If you have so much energy, why aren't you spending it on cultivation? Fuck. Chapter 1881. Ling Han is going to concoct celestial pills. Chapter 1881. Ling Han is going to concoct celestial pills. When they found out this person was Ling Han, everyone's feelings of anticipation instantly declined by half. Professionals were in charge of different aspects. There were limits to one's energy, and this was an incredibly realistic problem. Just how many years had you been alive for? Those with strong insight could very accurately make an assessment below 500 years. Then even if you had spent your life in the time cultivation chamber that even had the highest grade of time acceleration effects ever since birth, when all was said and done, that would only be 50,000 years. Becoming a one-star alchemist in 50,000 years. You've got to be joking. You must be crazy. But no matter what, a great prodigy of martial arts actually taking the alchemist test still incited the interest of the majority, and they watched from the sidelines. Furthermore, once the news spread out, it had even drawn the attention of a good number of holy sons and holy daughters. Some were qualified to contest for the position of chairperson, such as Lu Xianming, Zhao Bang, and Qin Guyu. The other holy sons and holy daughters knew that there was no hope for them to beat the competition, and had thus long since withdrawn from worldly matters, keeping an incredibly low profile. To say who was the very most stunned, that would have to be Lu Xianming. What did Ling Han mean? This question kept turning over and over in his mind. As a prodigy of martial arts, why did he want to become an alchemist? If Ling Han really became a one-star alchemist, the significance of this would be long-lasting and powerful. A one-star alchemist that had not exceeded 50,000 years in age. This was a supreme, super genius, which was even more stunning than Ling Han having defeated Zhao Qingfeng. After all, there were many martial arts prodigies. To say nothing of those farther away, merely Yin Xinlu alone was capable of suppressing a whole generation and becoming a supreme monarch. However, a one-star alchemist that had not exceeded 50,000 years in age was really something that hadn't even been heard of. This kind of prodigy would be fully supported by the Alchemy City, a new holy son. If he held the titles of both martial arts prodigy and alchemy prodigy, then what other holy son or holy daughter could contest with Ling Han for the position of future chairperson of Alchemy City? There was definitely no one that could match him, and he would be invincible. Lu Xianming felt as if there was thunder booming in his head. At this moment, he only had one thought. Ling Han definitely, absolutely could not succeed. Otherwise, he would be forced to stand on Ling Han's opposing side. He definitely could not possibly allow anyone to threaten his future position as chairperson. Involuntarily, he turned to look at Qin Guyu, Zhao Bang, and Kansas. Coincidentally, these three people were also looking at each other, and they could all see a signal from each other's eyes. There definitely could not be another holy son. much less a freakish prodigy like Ling Han. However, most people did not have that thought. On the contrary, some were very expectant. If Ling Han could succeed, then with his skill in both alchemy and martial arts, he would definitely become a legendary character of Alchemy City. And thus, in such complicated and anticipatory circumstances, Ling Han entered into the alchemy chamber, taking the most important step for him in Alchemy City. He was naturally going to concoct the Purple Moon Spirit Suppression Pill. Merely the time for concoction would be as long as 3 months. Thankfully, this alchemy chamber had time acceleration effects 100 times at that. Thus, if Ling Han could succeed, he would only need a single day as measured outside. In the eyes of everyone, all of Ling Han's movements had been sped up by 100 times. Hence, his movements were even smoother and faster, but even if they had been sped up by 100 times, his movements were still as smooth as water, causing everyone to feel as if they were enjoying a feast for the eyes. Exclamations of shock rang out in the surroundings. There was no lack of real alchemists here. As the saying went, laymen simply enjoyed the show, while connoisseurs recognized the artistry. Judging from Ling Han's movements, he indeed had the style of a veteran alchemist. This caused them to be incredibly shocked. Such a young alchemist's existence was really too inconceivable. It could only be said that there really were prodigies in this world, just that they all had not uncovered them previously. The expressions of Lu Xianming, Okan, and the others became gradually uglier. Ling Han had already begun pill concoction. Though this was the very most crucial step, a feeling of great foreboding already rose up in them. Who knew? This guy might really be able to succeed. They were all afraid. Though they were all holy sons and holy daughters, and in fact had reached the height of a 2-star alchemist, compared with Ling Han's accomplishments, they would pale in color. There were many alchemists that were of a higher grade than them, so why was it that they were the holy sons and holy daughters? That was because they had the potential to charge up to 3 stars, 4 stars, or even 5 stars. But if Ling Han could become a 1-star alchemist while he was less than 50,000 years old, then his potential undoubtedly surpassed all others. This was a powerful enemy. The 4 holy sons and holy daughters looked at each other, and all of them felt an intense killing intent rise up in them. Even Lu Xianming was no exception. His heart had already hardened. In the outside world, 1 day's time passed very quickly, and in the alchemy chamber, Ling Han was also about to pass 100 days' time. In his hands, alchemy had become an art, exuding a kind of beauty to it. Pa! He suddenly struck the cauldron strongly. The 9 heavens flame flickered slightly, and the cauldron instantly exploded. He failed. Everyone was watching with captivation, and when they saw that the cauldron had abruptly exploded, they were naturally very disappointed. But that was fine. Being able to hold on for so long until the cauldron exploded, Ling Han would definitely be able to become a 1-star alchemist without having to try many more times. Such a young 1-star alchemist, and added with the halo of being a great prodigy of martial arts. What kind of notion was this? A new star? This was definitely a super rising star, and was worth being recruited at all costs. Lu Xianming and the others also breathed out sighs of relief, but they had also become more cautious. They definitely had to get rid of Ling Han as soon as possible. Otherwise, once he had become a 1-star alchemist, or even a holy son, it would really be too difficult. However, everyone's expressions changed in the next second. Though the cauldron had shattered, 3 alchemical pills were dancing in the alchemy chamber. As if they had sprouted wings, they wanted to flee. He succeeded. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was really unexpected, and the expressions of Lu Xianming and the others also became incredibly ugly in an instant. They were aware that a frightening opponent would soon emerge. Ling Han opened his palm and grabbed the 3 soaring alchemical pills. With a surge of origin power, the 3 pills obediently stayed in his palm. He pushed the doors open and stepped out, tossing the alchemical pills to an alchemist, and smilingly said, "Please examine." Shwa! A great many alchemists immediately gathered around. Hiss! Not only were they successfully concocted, they are also medium grade. This young man, Are you people sure that he is a martial arts prodigy? I have stayed at the level of one-star alchemist for over 7 billion years and have not concocted medium-grade celestial pills even now. I practically am an extreme idiot. All the alchemists chattered away, incredibly stunned. It was really not easy for an alchemist to emerge. What more this kind of rookie that had risen up so strongly? He was really too scary. This was practically starting from medium grade. Ling Han, an alchemy apprentice, walked over. He looked to be only 15 to 16 years old, but his real age would at least have to be over millions and millions of years. The flame of life could not deceive. Seeing him walk over, everyone bore expressions of seriousness. Even those alchemists were no exception, and they all separated, giving way for him. They were not revering this alchemy apprentice, but the person he represented. Alchemist Yi Chang. Chapter 1882. I've hit you, but so what? Chapter 1882. I've hit you, but so what? I am. Ling Han smiled slightly. A little lazily, the alchemy apprentice said, My lord would like to see you. And who is your lord? Ling Han asked. He did not recognize this alchemy apprentice. That alchemy apprentice showed an expression of pride and declared, You don't even know my lord, and you could actually still become an alchemist? Ling Han couldn't help but feel angered. Whether I can become an alchemist or not is something that can be decided with a single word of nonsense from you. Just who do you think you are? He crossed his hands behind him and said, Indeed. I do not know who your lord is. Furthermore, just who do you think you are that you can talk to me in this manner? In terms of martial strength, he could practically crush all other severing mundane tiers, and in terms of alchemy, he was already a one-star alchemist. As for this alchemy apprentice, his martial strength was the third severance, and he was only a mere alchemy apprentice. At most, he could only be a high-grade trainee, and he thought he had the right to be arrogant in front of Ling Han? Fuck off. The alchemy apprentice couldn't help but tremble in fury. Pointing at Ling Han, he exclaimed, How dare you? You actually dare to insult me. Can't I? You are nothing in the first place, and you dare strut around in front of me. Ling Han said carelessly, Let me ask you this. What right do you have to be my equal? The alchemy apprentice was rendered speechless. The fact he could be so arrogant was naturally because of Alchemist Yi Chang, and he himself, well, he could not be said to be worth nothing, but at least there was really nothing too awesome about him, either. It was primarily because he was used to being arrogant. After he had become Alchemist Yi Chang's personal alchemy apprentice, who would not be polite towards him wherever he went. Even when Immortal Palace tier elites saw him, they would cordially call him Little Amo. Alchemists naturally were no exception. Alchemist Yi Chang was one of the only 3 4-star alchemists of Alchemy City. Thus, even when 3-star alchemists saw him, they would also be very polite, and would always have something to ask of him. For example, if they wanted to see Alchemist Yi Chang, they would need him to make a report. But now, a mere newly promoted 1-star alchemist at the 4th severance actually dared insult him straight to his face. Teach this, are you planning to rebel? Ling Han, you have gone too far, the alchemy apprentice exclaimed in a high-pitched voice. If you offend me, you will not be able to move a single step in Alchemy City. Seeing this scene, everyone shook their heads. This alchemy apprentice had the surname of Mo, and was usually addressed as Alchemist Move-In. If he was actually not an alchemist, everyone would still give him some face. As the trusted aide of Alchemist Yi Chang, this alchemy apprentice Mo possessed very strong authority, and practically no one dared to offend him. Even for those like Lu Xianming, they would be very polite in front of this person. This brat was really a hot-tempered youngster. Why were you squabbling with alchemy apprentice Mo? If he said a few derogatory words about you in front of Alchemist Yi Chang, you would be in a lot of trouble. Okan's anger finally dissipated somewhat. That was because he was not the only person Ling Han had driven to exploding in fury. Just see, even he did not wish to offend alchemy apprentice Mo, but Ling Han actually confronted him directly without a single bit of hesitation. Though he still hated Ling Han, he could not help but admit that he was impressed. Ling Han scoffed and declared, You are but a lackey. What are you calling out for? Don't forget, everything that is yours is bestowed by another. Since he could bestow, he naturally could also withdraw. You think you are qualified? Alchemy Apprentice Imo exclaimed sharply. He had never been treated with such contempt before. He was determined to make Ling Han bow his head in front of him. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I will not lower myself to the level of trash. Step aside, don't block the way. Seeing Ling Han was about to leave, Alchemy Apprentice Imo hurriedly jumped out, raised his arm to stop his advance, and exclaimed, You can't leave. What is it? Want to come to blows with me? Ling Han asked smilingly. Do you think I'm afraid of you? In the first place, Alchemy Apprentice Imo treated everything as below his notice. Furthermore, he was walking the path of alchemy, so he naturally did not know much about Ling Han's situation. In his eyes, while he himself was only a third severance, because he was not that skilled in alchemy, he had placed more of his concentration on martial arts. Thus, he, a third severance, would not lose to a fourth severance alchemist. Pooh! A considerable number of people spluttered out in laughter. Really, one who was ignorant had nothing to fear. This was quite interesting. They heard that Ling Han was going to take the Alchemist test and were incredibly stunned. On the other hand, Alchemy Apprentice Imo thought that Ling Han was only a prodigy of alchemy, and when he heard Ling Han speak of coming to blows, he naturally scoffed derisively. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, who would believe that there would actually be such a prodigy in this world? Alchemist Imo, you can't. Someone wanted to curry favor and hurriedly explained Ling Han's background. My gods! Alchemy Apprentice Mo's mouth suddenly twitched. Are you even still human? It's already enough that you are so powerful in martial arts and strength, but you are actually a prodigy of alchemy as well. Won't you let others live? His aura immediately weakened, but because he was used to being arrogant and overbearing, he immediately puffed up his chest again and said, I will not come to blows with a barbarian like you. You insulting me is equivalent to insulting Alchemist Zicheng, and that is insulting the whole alchemy city. Who would agree for you to be so willful here? Ling Han couldn't help but smile in spite of himself and said, You are really quite thick-skinned. A mere alchemy apprentice, who is only a high-grade trainee at most, a mere third severance, and you actually say that insulting you is insulting the whole alchemy city? There's no way I can actually believe that. Humph, now you know. Alchemy Apprentice Imo was a little proud. This was not the first time that he had used his powerful connection as an intimidation tactic. Even a great many king tiers had bowed their heads in front of him. Ling Han nodded and said, If you think you can try insulting me? So what if I insult you? For a bastard like you, I can insult you 100-inch. Pa! Alchemy Apprentice Imo had not even finished his words when Ling Han had picked him up by the neck. Naturally, the former could not speak further like this. His legs were kicking around in panic, and even his face had turned green. Everyone has heard. It was he who insulted me. Ling Han shrugged, seeming to be very innocent. I am a one-star alchemist, and this little alchemy apprentice actually dared to insult me. You say, does he deserve to be beaten? Of course he does. He did not even wait for others to answer, and he delivered a slap. This slap carried a lot of force. Alchemy Apprentice Imo directly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood as well as a few broken teeth. One side of his face was swelling up at a visible rate. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a sharp breath. As the saying went, before you hit the dog, look at the master. His master was Alchemist Zicheng, one of the top-tier characters of Alchemist Zicheng. So was he anyone you could teach a lesson to? But the problem here was that Ling Han was very much in the right. You, a mere high-grade trainee, actually dared to insult a one-star alchemist. Just what was the hierarchy worth like this? Without norms or standards, how could anything be accomplished? Pa. Ling Han delivered a series of slaps until he vented all his pin-up anger, and he finally tossed Alchemy Apprentice Imo casually to the side. To dare make a move like this, he naturally had his own consideration, and it was not completely because he was rash. Firstly, Alchemist Zicheng had to have a very high opinion of him, and that was why he sent someone to invite him over. Then, As long as this great alchemist was a more reasonable person, he would not just listen to alchemy apprentice Mo's side of the story. Secondly, even if Alchemist Yicheng was deceived, weren't there still two other four-star alchemists? On one side, it was a frighteningly young alchemist prodigy, and on the other side it was only a lackey. Whom would the two great alchemists side with, then? If the scales were still tipped in alchemy apprentice Mo's favor with this, then there would be no more significance for Ling Han to stay here. He would not want such a decayed place, even if it was given to him. With a flutter of his sleeve, Ling Han strode off. Judging by Lu Xianming's expression, there was no possible way for him to continue staying at the latter's home, so he had best not wait for the latter to speak up and take his leave of his own volition. Everyone looked at Ling Han's receding back, and then turned to look at alchemy apprentice Mo, who was still moaning on the ground. They all felt an admiration rise up from the bottoms of their hearts. This brat was really awesome. Chapter 1883, Split. Chapter 1883, Split. After returning to the Lu clan, Ling Han immediately went to call the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Just as they were about to leave, however, Bewitching Maiden Ro suddenly arrived. Upon seeing the Empress, a look of apprehension instantly spread across the other seductive woman's face. She was stunningly beautiful, and she was confident that she could seduce all people in the world. However, the Empress was even more beautiful and charming than her. This was a huge blow to her self-confidence. Moreover, the Empress was extremely intimidating, and this caused Bewitching Maiden Ro to feel as if she couldn't lift her head before her. However, Bewitching Maiden Ro was a bewitching woman, after all, and a radiant smile immediately blossomed across her face. "Oh, the three of you are truly deeply in love. Do you always stick together like this?" The Empress swept her gaze across the bewitching woman, and there was a dignified and imposing expression on her breathtakingly beautiful face. "Call me Big Sister." The bewitching woman pouted upon hearing this. After hesitating for a brief moment, she said in a soft voice, "Big Sister." She appeared extremely reluctant yet helpless. This was the power of strength. Bewitching Maiden Ro was completely helpless when she came across the Empress. Ling Han couldn't help but burst into laughter. "We're about to leave the Lu clan," he said. "What trouble have you caused this time? Did you beat up some holy son from the alchemy city?" Bewitching Maiden Ro asked with a worried expression. Ling Han was truly unparalleled when it came to causing trouble. He would cause trouble wherever he went. He had yet to fully resolve his conflict with the two Celestial King tier forces, yet he had already gone off to provoke a holy son from the alchemy city. However, this was to be expected from Ling Han. Ling Han scratched his head upon hearing this. Did Bewitching Maiden Ro already understand him this well? "Why didn't you ask whether I've become bored of living at the Lu clan? Perhaps I'm only going out for a spin to improve my mood." Gasp! Has my troublemaking ability already received public acknowledgement? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden covered her mouth and chuckled. It was rare to see her husband being rendered speechless. Moreover, because the Empress was present, she wasn't afraid of Bewitching Maiden Ro seducing Ling Han away. I only beat up a measly alchemy apprentice," Ling Han said with a calm expression. "Oh," Bewitching Maiden Ro breathed a sigh of relief. Although alchemists were the most venerated people in the alchemy city, alchemy apprentices were only alchemy apprentices, after all. Thus, beating them up wouldn't be a huge deal. At most, one would simply have to pay some compensation. With Ling Han's current cultivation talent, there would definitely be countless elites willing to help him resolve any problems. However, he was Alchemist Yicheng's alchemy apprentice, Ling Han added. If it had been anyone else, they would have definitely spat a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. However, Bewitching Maiden Ro was from the Purity sect, after all, so she was most skilled in controlling her expressions. Thus, she didn't lose her composure because of this. However, the expression on her beautiful face was still quite spectacular. She was naturally aware of who Alchemist Yicheng was. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come here to participate in the competition for the Tao regulating pill. "You actually beat up Alchemist Yicheng's alchemy apprentice?" Gasp! "Why don't you ascend to the heavens?" Although Alchemy City was only a 4-star force, its status could somewhat rival that of Celestial King tier forces due to the esteemed position of alchemists. That being the case, Alchemist Yichang could naturally be viewed as somewhat of a Celestial King as well. Ling Han had beat up the subordinate of a Celestial King, so was he not trying to ascend to the heavens? Go, go, go. We need to hurry up and leave. Bewitching Maiden Row frantically said. Powerful cultivators like them stored everything in spatial god tools, so they could immediately leave at any time they wanted. Ling Han was slightly surprised, and he said, "This has got nothing to do with you, so why are you leaving as well? Moreover, that Lu Xianming seems to be fairly interested in you. Aren't you going to stay and become the wife of an alchemist?" One nonsense. My aspirations are grand, and my future husband definitely has to be an elite capable of ruling over an entire territory. Measly alchemists are nothing but playthings in my palm. There was a proud expression on her face, and she continued, "Men who can't conquer me aren't worthy of my attention." Ling Han was stunned upon hearing this. Which man in the world could conquer this greatly bewitching woman? He was certain that he couldn't do so. "Rest assured, I'm here to help," the Empress whispered into his ear. Perhaps others couldn't conquer bewitching Maiden Row, but she definitely could. A strange expression spread across Ling Han's face. From the beginning until now, the Empress had never abandoned any opportunity to capture this bewitching woman who possessed the 9 revolutions charm physique. However, it was extremely odd that she was trying to capture another beautiful woman for him as his wife herself. The 4 of them hurriedly started to leave. However, just as they exited the main gates, they saw Lu Xianming and the others returning. Sun Dong wore a smug expression of success. He had initially thought that he would need to swallow his humiliation, and he had thought that he would never be able to exact revenge. Moreover, he might even need to act respectfully before Ling Han and do his best to please him. After all, it was clear that Lu Xianming held Ling Han in higher regard. Unexpectedly, however, Ling Han had actually gone off to complete an examination to become an alchemist or whatnot. This had directly pitted him against Lu Xianming. Afterward, he even beat up Alchemist Yi Cheng's alchemy apprentice. He hadn't witnessed this scene because he had arrived slightly later. Upon learning of it, however, he had laughed loudly after faltering for a brief moment. Ling Han was a huge troublemaker. Ling Han had beaten him up before, so now that his status had risen, was it a surprise that he had beaten up Alchemist Yi Cheng's alchemy apprentice? Ling Han. Lu Xianming's expression was dark, and he said, "Where have I offended you? Why are you treating me like this?" If Ling Han had only beaten up alchemy apprentice Mo, Lu Xianming could have helped him resolve things with his status as a holy son. At most, he would only need to give up some slight benefits. However, Ling Han had directly taken the exam to become a 1-star alchemist without even consulting him. Just what kind of attitude was this? Ling Han shook his head and said, "Brother Lu, I think you're misunderstanding something. I'm only your guest, not your subordinate. I don't need to ask for your agreement or permission to do anything. Moreover, I've only stayed at your place for a few days, so how am I mistreating you by doing this?" An expression of slight fury spread across Lu Xianming's face, and he said, "Are you intent on opposing me?" Ling Han sighed upon hearing this. Why did Lu Xianming always act as if he owed him something? In terms of owing things, Lu Xianming owed him a life. How inexplicable. Lu Xianming had truly lost himself to the title of Holy Son. Did he believe that everyone needed to sacrifice themselves for him? Who had indulged him into developing such a wild belief? "Think what you want," Ling Han said with a wave of his hand. He then calmly strode away. "Celestial Maiden Row," Lu Xianming shouted. "Are you truly going to follow this person? I urge you to think this through. This will bring calamity upon not only you, but perhaps even the Purity sect. Thank you for your hospitality, Holy Son Lu. However, I've already disturbed you for too long, so I won't trouble young Master Lu any longer." Bewitching Maiden Row said without even turning around to face him. Lu Xianming's expression became even darker. He naturally understood that this was only an excuse from bewitching Maiden Row. In reality, she was trying to draw a line between herself and him. He clenched his fists as he wallowed in this feeling of betrayal. First, it was Ling Han. He had eaten his food and lived at his place, yet he had actually gone off to take an examination to become an alchemist. His actions were as dishonorable as could be. Then it was bewitching Maiden Ro. He had already been conquered by her beauty and charm, and he had viewed her as his future wife. Now, however, she was actually leaving without any reluctance at all. This was naturally a one-sided affection on Lu Xinming's part. To say nothing of the fact that Ling Han didn't know him, it was also preposterous to expect bewitching Maiden Ro to offer her body just because he had hosted her for 2 days. Ling Han was already tired of dealing with Lu Xinming. He waved his hand and walked away. If Lu Xinming were smart, this matter would conclude right here and now. If that were the case, everything would naturally be fine. If he were intent on causing more trouble, however, Ling Han also wouldn't hold back anymore. Bewitching Maiden Ro quickened her pace. If she had to make a choice, Ling Han was naturally far more reliable than Lu Xinming. Chapter 1884, Giving In. Chapter 1884, Giving In. Holy Sun! Sun Dong called. He shuffled over, and there was venom in his eyes. Lu Xinming glared at him and said, "Don't say anything else." He needed to calm down by himself so that he could come up with a detailed plan. "Understood," Sun Dong said before hurriedly stepping back. A wicked smile tugged at the corners of his lips. If Lu Xinming didn't help him, how could Ling Han overcome this calamity? He had beaten up Alchemist Yi Cheng's alchemy apprentice, so how could he resolve this issue easily? Heh. Sun Dong chuckled in his mind, and the wicked smile on his face grew even wider. He could barely stop himself from bursting into wild laughter. Elsewhere, Okan and Qin Guyu were also engaged in a discussion with Lu Xinming's subordinates. Ling Han's sudden rise had completely ruined their plans. Perhaps Lu Xinming wasn't their combined target anymore. In fact, they might even have to team up with Lu Xinming to deal with Ling Han first. In the end, however, they decided to do nothing. After all, Ling Han had beaten up Alchemy Apprentice Imo. With Alchemist Yi Cheng's protective nature, would he let Ling Han off the hook? Since Alchemist Yi Cheng was inevitably going to target Ling Han, was there any need for them to waste their time and effort? Moreover, if even Alchemist Yi Cheng failed to deal with Ling Han, would they be able to do any better? Thus, they decided to stand back and observe the situation. Not only them, but many forces in the city also halted their attempts to recruit Ling Han. They needed to observe whether Ling Han could overcome this huge challenge. If he couldn't, their trying to recruit him would be nothing more than a waste of time and resources. It was amid such an atmosphere that Ling Han went to the Alchemist Pavilion. From the second level onward, there were no more inns in the Alchemy City. Those who could come here were either residents of the Alchemy City, or they possessed extremely unique status and were directly hosted by the officials of this city. Thus, Ling Han had nowhere to reside even if he had money in his hands. That being the case, he could only go to the Alchemist Pavilion. He was a one-star alchemist now, so he naturally had the right to stay in the Alchemist Pavilion. No one could shoo him away. Upon seeing Ling Han arrive with numerous beautiful women, everyone in the Alchemist Pavilion wore different expressions. Ling Han still dared to come here? After overcoming their initial shock, most people turned their gazes to the Empress. Fortunately, she was wearing a veil to cover her face. Otherwise, her beauty would have definitely caused a huge commotion. Ling Han smiled before dragging some random person over and asking, "I've heard that alchemists can reside here. Am I right?" This person wore a bitter expression, and he felt as if he had been struck by great misfortune. There were so many people around, yet Ling Han had somehow grabbed him. What would he do if he was infected with Ling Han's misfortune? However, he didn't dare to ignore Ling Han's questions. After all, Ling Han was fearless, and he had even beaten up Alchemy Apprentice Imo. How could a measly person like him resist? "Why, yes," he replied with a nod. "Very well. What procedures are there?" "I'm going to stay here," Ling Han said. The alchemy chambers here all possess the ability to speed up time. Moreover, he didn't need to use time cultivation chambers for cultivation, so using the alchemy chambers here would save him a large amount of money. As such, he decided to refine alchemical pills here. The unfortunate man had no option but to follow Ling Han's command. He was only a beginner trainee, so he could only act subserviently before Ling Han. However, his expression was as bitter as a bitter melon. Everyone was astonished upon seeing this. Ling Han had only just beaten up Alchemy Apprentice Mo, yet he already dared to boldly enter the Alchemist Pavilion? Where had his courage come from? However, this made sense. If he hadn't been so wanton, would he have dared to beat up Alchemy Apprentice Mo? Ling Han had only just settled down when he saw Alchemy Apprentice Mo arrive. Ling Han, get the fuck over here. Ling Han walked out of his room, only to see the furious Alchemy Apprentice Mo. His expression was as if he weren't afraid of him. Ling Han couldn't help but smile and say, "What's wrong? That beating wasn't satisfying enough? Have you come for more?" Alchemy Apprentice Mo's face involuntarily flushed red. His previous encounter with Ling Han had been utter humiliation. He humphed and said, "Wipe that smug smile off your face. I've come here at the order of Grandmaster Zicheng. I'm taking you over to accept your punishment." As expected, everyone nodded in their minds. Alchemist Zicheng was renowned for his protective personality, and it was also because of this that Alchemy Apprentice Mo dared to act so brashly. If things could be resolved easily, how would everyone be so apprehensive of Alchemy Apprentice Mo? "Oh, so you've come on a fabricated command again?" Ling Han said. "Since this is Grandmaster Zicheng's command, why don't you show me his personally written orders?" Alchemy Apprentice Mo faltered upon hearing this. Where would he get a personally written order from? Who in the Alchemy City didn't recognize him? He was Grandmaster Zicheng's alchemy apprentice. As such, his words represented Grandmaster Zicheng's will. It was also because of this that he could sometimes fabricate commands to target whomever he wanted. Of course, he didn't dare to take things too far. In any case, he had indeed come here at the order of Grandmaster Zicheng. Moreover, his task was indeed to take Ling Han over. However, Grandmaster Zicheng hadn't said that he was going to punish Ling Han. Alchemy Apprentice Mo had added this in himself. In his eyes, Grandmaster Zicheng was so fond of him, so was he not calling Ling Han over to punish him? Anyhow, he genuinely didn't have a personally written order. "You actually dare to question me?" Alchemy Apprentice Mo said in anger. He was truly aggrieved this time, and this left him feeling extremely unhappy. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I'm a one-star alchemist, while you're nothing but a measly alchemy apprentice. Why can't I question you? Moreover, the level hierarchy of alchemists is extremely strict. Is a measly alchemy apprentice like you worthy of giving me commands? Who's given you such courage? By the looks of it, you're asking for another beating. You dare?" Alchemy Apprentice Mo cried in a shrill voice. However, he involuntarily stepped back as he spoke. He was truly afraid of Ling Han. In the past, who had ever dared to beat him up? Not long ago, however, he had suffered a beating at the hands of Ling Han. This was naturally fresh in his mind. Ling Han laughed and said, "If you're not feeling guilty, why are you retreating?" "Why am I retreating? It's naturally because you're frightening me." However, Alchemy Apprentice Mo couldn't say this directly. After all, saying this would make him appear extremely weak. He straightened his neck and mustered his courage before saying, "I won't argue with a barbarian like you anymore. Grandmaster Zicheng has ordered you to immediately go over. If you ignore this command, you'll have to suffer the consequences yourself." Alchemy Apprentice Mo was using Alchemist Zicheng's name to pressure Ling Han. After all, a 4-star alchemist enjoyed the same status as a celestial king. Who dared to ignore them? However, Ling Han refused to budge, and he said, "Oh, I only know about a fabricated command. Moreover, if someone fails their task twice, I wonder what's going to happen to them?" Alchemy Apprentice Mo's expression involuntarily changed. Grandmaster Zicheng was protective of him, but this didn't mean that he could truly act as he wanted. If he failed to carry out Alchemist Zicheng's orders twice in a row, Ling Han would naturally suffer a miserable fate. However, would he be any better off? He wasn't a mighty figure, and his position wasn't irreplaceable. He caught a breath before saying, "Ling Han, I'm not issuing a fake order. The Grandmaster truly commanded me to take you over." His attitude was no longer overbearing and aggressive. Right now, his priority was to trick Ling Han into entering the 5th level. Once he arrived there, he would naturally be at the mercy of Alchemist Zicheng. However, Alchemist Zicheng hadn't ordered him to forcefully capture Ling Han, so how could he dare to do so? He could reinterpret Alchemist Zicheng's words to some extent, but he definitely didn't dare to fabricate them. This was a rule that he abided by. Ling Han shook his head and said, "A mere verbal statement is no guarantee. I don't believe you." Alchemy Apprentice Mo was almost driven nuts. How was Ling Han so unreasonable? He hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and saying, "Then how can I convince you to follow me?" Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. It was clear that Alchemy Apprentice Mo had given in. He was actually yielding to Ling Han. What a detestable person. If they treated him respectfully, he would become increasingly arrogant and wanton. However, after being beaten up by Ling Han, he had actually become so obedient. Fuck. Chapter 1885. Yielding Again. Chapter 1885. Yielding Again. To Alchemy Apprentice Mo, giving in to Ling Han was also a great humiliation. He was actually lowering his head to someone who had beaten him up and humiliated him. Just thinking about this made him feel stifled. However, he had already displeased Alchemist Zicheng once, so could he fail his task again? He couldn't endure Alchemist Zicheng's wrath. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Aya, my legs feel so sore." He retrieved a chair and sat down. He then crossed his legs, and his intentions were as clear as could be. He wanted Alchemy Apprentice Mo to massage his legs. Holy fuck, how overbearing. Everyone's heart thumped upon seeing this. Ling Han was far too audacious. He actually wanted Alchemy Apprentice Mo to massage his legs. One had to realize that he served Grandmaster Zicheng. Was Ling Han viewing himself as Grandmaster Zicheng II? Alchemy Apprentice Mo's face flushed red with anger. "You're taking things too far. Way too far. Ling Han, aren't you going to leave yourself a path of retreat?" he questioned loudly. He felt incredibly vexed. "What have I done?" Ling Han asked in a calm voice. Indeed, Ling Han hadn't said anything at all. Everything was simply Alchemy Apprentice Mo's own interpretation and understanding. However, who didn't understand Ling Han's intentions? Alchemy Apprentice Mo gritted his teeth and asked, "Is this your condition?" Ling Han smiled and didn't say anything. Alchemy Apprentice Mo almost exploded with anger. However, he had no option but to forcefully suppress his anger, contemplating what he had to gain and lose. In the past, he had also acted on Alchemist Zicheng's orders to invite other people. Which of them hadn't been as excited as a monkey to receive Alchemist Zicheng's invitation? Thus, they had only known how to thank him profusely. That being the case, he had also seized the opportunity to ask for some benefits from them. However, Ling Han was an exception. He had directly targeted and provoked him. Upon thinking of this, Alchemy Apprentice Mo truly started to feel regretful. If his attitude toward Ling Han had been even an iota better, none of this would have ever happened. Unfortunately, however, he had treated Ling Han like he had treated those people in the past. Time could be sped up, but it couldn't be reversed. Thus, he had no opportunity to change his previous choices. If he failed to complete Alchemist Zicheng's order again, it was extremely likely that he would lose his favor. What did this signify? Alchemy Apprentice Mo was well aware of what would happen. Although many people wanted to befriend him and curry favor with him, this was simply because he was Alchemist Zicheng's alchemy apprentice. However, he had also offended heaven knew how many people. Once he lost his status, what would await him? He would definitely be killed by his enemies. Upon thinking of this terrifying possibility, Alchemy Apprentice Mo couldn't help but shudder in fear. He gritted his teeth and slowly walked forward. It can't be, right? Is Alchemy Apprentice Mo truly yielding? Everyone was transfixed with shock and disbelief upon seeing this. As it turned out, this person was truly a sheep in wolf's clothing. In the past, they had all been fearful of him because of his status. In reality, however, he was nothing but a paper tiger. They all came to a sudden realization. It was because of their extreme care and reverence toward Alchemist Zi Cheng that they had even treated Alchemy Apprentice as a high and mighty being. In reality, however, he was nothing more than a mere alchemy apprentice. Just how profound and powerful was Alchemist Zi Cheng? Would he truly be affected by a measly alchemy apprentice? Would his decisions truly be influenced by a measly alchemy apprentice? Alchemy Apprentice Mo arrived beside Ling Han, forcefully enduring the humiliation. He then bent down and started to massage Ling Han's legs. Ling Han didn't tell him to stop, so Alchemy Apprentice Mo continued to massage his legs. Only after an hour did Ling Han finally stretch and say, "Ah, my legs don't feel sore anymore. Let's take a walk." Alchemy Apprentice Mo breathed a sigh of relief. However, there was an ominous glint hidden deep in his eyes. Once he completed Alchemist Zi Cheng's order, he would definitely teach Ling Han a lesson. If he didn't torture Ling Han into questioning life, his surname wouldn't be Mo. Ling Han noticed this, and he couldn't help but smile and say, "I've been frightened by your expression, so it's probably best if I rest here for a while longer. I need some time to compose myself." He returned to his seat. "Fuck your sister." Alchemy Apprentice Mo almost spat a mouthful of blood. "You can't toy with me like this. I only just finished massaging your legs in public, so you can't do this to me again." He silently cursed himself. Why had he revealed his killing intent just then? More importantly, his killing intent had actually been seen by Ling Han. "It's best not to keep Grandmaster Zi Cheng waiting," he hurriedly said. Although this sounded like advice, it was actually more of a plea. Alchemy Apprentice Mo stopped just short of saying, "Grandpa, stop messing with me." Ling Han cast a long and meaningful glance at Alchemy Apprentice Mo. Only when Alchemy Apprentice Mo's heart started to thump wildly against his chest did he finally say, "All right, let's get going." Alchemy Apprentice Mo hurriedly rushed over to help Ling Han up. His actions were so respectful and obsequious that everyone couldn't help shake their heads. At this moment, did Alchemy Apprentice Mo still possess a shred of pride and arrogance? Sure enough, evil people could only be overcome by evil people. However, Ling Han would definitely feel incredibly aggrieved if he knew of their thoughts. After all, how could he be considered an evil person? Alchemy Apprentice Mo led the way, and Ling Han lazily trailed behind him. He had already placed the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in the Black Tower. It was always good to remain cautious. After all, what if his expectations were different from Alchemist Zi Cheng's actual thoughts? If Alchemist Zi Cheng targeted him, he could indeed enter the Black Tower right away. However, what about his two beautiful wives? As Ling Han and Alchemy Apprentice Mo disappeared into the distance, the others in the Alchemist Pavilion immediately launched into spirited discussions. Once Ling Han visited Alchemist Zi Cheng, would the Alchemy City lose a young rising star? Many people shook their heads in pity. They were convinced that Ling Han's future was fraught with grim possibilities. Although Ling Han had gained the upper hand in his tussle with Alchemy Apprentice Mo, the most critical factor wasn't between the two of them. Instead, the final decision lay with Alchemist Zi Cheng. If Alchemist Zi Cheng was dissatisfied with Ling Han, this young rising star wouldn't live to see tomorrow. With Ling Han's crappy attitude, it was hard to say what would happen. Under Alchemy Apprentice Mo's guidance, the two of them quickly arrived at the transfer formation outside the city. Alchemy Apprentice Mo enjoyed a fairly high status, so he didn't need to use star stones to activate this transfer formation. The two of them were quickly teleported to the 5th level. In reality, the 5th level was even smaller than the previous 4 levels. Of course, this was only relatively speaking. In terms of absolute area, it was still astonishingly large. There were only 17 mountains here, and each of them housed a mighty figure. Even if they had descendants, they generally wouldn't live together. Usually, they would only live with 1 or 2 alchemy apprentices or cultivation apprentices. Thus, there were few people at this level. Gazing into the distance, one could only see blue mountains and green trees. This was a place that was brimming with vitality. Alchemy Apprentice Mo led Ling Han to the 7th mountain peak. In terms of how these mountains were numbered, Ling Han wasn't sure if it represented anything. There were no paths on the mountain, So Ling Han and Alchemy Apprenticeimo directly flew to the peak of the mountain. There were no wild winds here, so even severing mundane tier cultivators could easily reach the peak of the mountains. A small mansion appeared before them. This was truly a small mansion. Compared to the mountain peak that it rested on, it looked like a tiny speck of sand in a vast ocean. You can enter now. Grandmaster Zicheng has already been waiting for a very long time. Alchemy Apprenticeimo said with a cold sneer. In his eyes, Ling Han was seeking death by making Grandmaster Zicheng wait for so long. Ling Han smiled calmly as he strode into the mansion. There was speculation in his mind, but this speculation had yet to be verified. Alchemy Apprenticeimo didn't follow him inside. Instead, he closed the gates and stood guard outside. Inside the mansion, the most eye-catching area was an alchemy room. This was a room that could greatly speed up the flow of time. However, it could only do so by 100 times. This was already the absolute limit of 4-star forces. Ling Han glanced at it for a brief moment, and only then did he cast his gaze toward the elder who was calmly sipping tea in the center of the garden. His hair and beard were white, yet he was filled with vigor and vitality. This was especially the case for his eyes, which were filled with life and energy. He gave off a dignified and imposing aura. Brat, you're fairly courageous, aren't you? Chapter 1886, Huge Gamble. Chapter 1886, Huge Gamble. This elder was naturally Alchemist Zicheng. There was an imposing expression in his eyes as he gazed at Ling Han, and it was as if just his gaze alone would be able to suppress all matter. He was indescribably mighty. He was an ascending origin tier elite, after all, so he was naturally as powerful as could be. Ling Han's mind whirred, yet his expression remained unchanging. Instead, he smiled calmly and said, "Senior, I don't quite understand. I invited you time and time again, yet you declined my invitations with all kinds of excuses. You seem to view yourself in even higher regard than me?" Alchemist Zicheng said. His expression was solemn, and a projection of the great Tao started to materialize behind him, transforming into all kinds of different shapes and forms. This was a projection that was filled with imposing might. This old man was even stronger than Old Demon Blood Shadow. Even though Ling Han was too weak to compare their auras, he had a nagging feeling that Alchemist Zicheng was more powerful. He smiled and said, "I've been treated unfairly." "Oh? You beat up my alchemy apprentice, yet you're claiming that you've been treated unfairly?" Alchemist Zicheng couldn't help but chuckle in extreme anger. However, Ling Han remained extremely calm and composed. If Alchemist Zicheng genuinely wanted to punish him, would he speak so much nonsense with him? To a 4-star alchemist, Ling Han was nothing more than a severing mundane tier cultivator and a 1-star alchemist, regardless of how freakish he was. He was nothing in their eyes. They could kill him with a single thought. Now, however, Alchemist Zicheng was actually speaking so much nonsense with him. Combined with his previous speculation, Ling Han was even more certain of himself now. "I've indeed been treated unfairly," he said. "Moreover, I feel extremely aggrieved and furious." "Heh, you're becoming more and more wanton," Alchemist Zicheng said with a cold smile. Ling Han remained composed as he said, "A measly alchemy apprentice actually dared to shout commands at me, a 1-star alchemist. What happened to the rules and regulations? To say nothing of other 1-star alchemists, even 2-star alchemists and 3-star alchemists remained silent. It was as if they were already accustomed to this. I find this to be unacceptable." "Oh, so that's your reason for beating up my alchemy apprentice?" Alchemist Zicheng asked in a calm voice. There was a profound expression on his face. Ling Han smiled and replied, "Indeed? How audacious of you. Have you heard of this phrase before? Before beating a dog, one also needs to consider their master," Alchemist Zicheng said in a menacing voice. A terrifying killing intent radiated from his body, and he immediately transformed into a petrifying demon king. He lightly slammed the table, and Ling Han shuddered even though there was no noise. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse. This was the might of an ascending origin tier elite. Each of their actions could affect one's mind. Seeing that you're a prodigy, I'll make an exception and give you a chance, Alchemist Yicheng said. He paused for a moment before continuing. I can spare you if you immediately kowtow and apologize to my alchemy apprentice. Ling Han didn't hesitate before replying, I can be killed, but I can't be humiliated. Moreover, I did nothing wrong, so why do I need to apologize? Haha, I've lived for trillions of years, yet this is the first time I've come across such an audacious brat. Since you insist, you can die with your measly dignity intact. Alchemist Yicheng immediately lashed out with his palm. Boom! His palm transformed into a colossal flaming hand that was shrouded in symbols of the great Tao. To severing mundane tier cultivators, this was nothing short of a palm of death. To say nothing of facing it head-on, just glancing at it could instill them with boundless terror. Those who were more cowardly might directly collapse upon seeing it. Moreover, this palm strike was extremely slow, and it was as if it wanted to drown Ling Han in terror before taking his life. Ling Han clasped his hands behind his back and stood as straight as a sword. If this palm struck him, he would definitely have no time to enter the Black Tower. Right now, he was taking a huge gamble. He was gambling on his understanding of Alchemist Yicheng. If he lost this gamble, he would have to pay with his life. In reality, Ling Han didn't need to take this gamble. Since he had the Black Tower, he would naturally be safe if he entered it. Of course, this was unless he came across a celestial king. However, the more powerful he became, the less he wanted to rely on the Black Tower. At the very least, he didn't want to rely on it when he didn't need to. If you kneel and beg for forgiveness, you still have a chance to survive, Alchemist Yicheng said. His voice boomed like thunder, almost rupturing Ling Han's eardrums. His words more so pierced into his Tao heart, carrying with it a profound and unstoppable might. Ling Han didn't reply, and he simply remained standing straight and proud. Boom! The palm landed, and the entire seventh peak shuddered. A devastating shock wave swept past, and Ling Han's figure gradually reappeared. He was completely unscathed. This wasn't because Ling Han was heaven-defyingly powerful. He naturally couldn't block the attack of an ascending origin tier elite. Instead, it was because the palm strike had avoided him at the last possible moment. Otherwise, he would have already been dead. Moreover, not a single shred of his corpse would have remained. Ha ha ha! Alchemist Yicheng chortled with laughter. His killing intent instantly vanished, and his laughter was as joyous as could be. It was as if his mood had suddenly improved to the extreme. Although Ling Han's back was drenched in cold sweat, his expression still remained calm and unchanging. He knew that he had gambled right. Anyhow, even if he had gambled wrong, it wasn't as if he would truly die. After all, he could channel the indestructible heaven scroll and rise from the ashes, giving him another chance. Moreover, doing so would even dispel the black murderous curse. However, it was best not to use this kind of resurrection technique. After all, such techniques couldn't be used many times. Following his advance in cultivation, he would only obtain an extra 1 or 2 opportunities to channel rising from the ashes. Moreover, he viewed the black murderous curse as a kind of grindstone to temper himself with, so he didn't want to dispel it anytime soon. Brat, you're truly audacious, Alchemist Yicheng said. Contrary to before, Ling Han became much more respectful. He clasped his hands in respect and said, "Thank you for sparing me, senior." A look of appreciation spread across Alchemist Yicheng's face. Those who only knew how to be rude and unreasonable had no future. However, Ling Han knew when to be tough, and he also knew when to be respectful. Where he needed to be tough, he would be extremely tough. Where he needed to be respectful, he would ensure that he followed all of the proper etiquette. Alchemist Yicheng was extremely satisfied with his performance. After so many years, he had finally found a prodigy who suited his tastes. "You already guessed that I wouldn't kill you?" Alchemist Yicheng asked. Ling Han smiled and replied, "I was 70 to 80% sure. But you weren't 100% sure. Moreover, what if you guessed wrong?" Alchemist Yicheng asked. Ling Han's smile remained, and he answered, A probability of 70 to 80% was already worth a gamble. He naturally wouldn't say that he could still rise from the ashes, giving him a sliver of a chance even if he guessed wrong. "Bravo! Bravo!" Alchemist Zicheng exclaimed. His eyebrows and beard quivered, and it was clear that he was beside himself with excitement. He gestured with his hand, and his expression became as kindly as could be. "Lad, come here, take a seat." Ling Han walked over and sat opposite Alchemist Zicheng. He rested his hands on his knees, and his expression was filled with respect. Alchemist Zicheng became even more satisfied. His eyes were filled with approval, and he smilingly asked, "Do you consider me as someone who will allow those beside me to act in a domineering and wanton manner?" Ling Han spoke his mind, saying, "I didn't understand Senior before, so upon seeing Alchemy Apprentice Mo's arrogance and haughtiness, I indeed considered Senior as such a person. However, after teaching Alchemy Apprentice Mo a lesson, the law enforcement officers that I expected didn't arrive. Instead, I was visited by Alchemy Apprentice Mo again. At that time, I knew that Senior definitely wasn't such a person." "Haha." Alchemist Zicheng laughed heartily upon hearing this. "Then tell me, why do I allow little Mo to act so wantonly, so much so that many others also consider me as an unreasonable person?" Chapter 1887, Sudden Turn. Chapter 1887, Sudden Turn. Ling Han pondered for a moment before replying, "Perhaps Senior wanted to find someone who isn't afraid of power and might?" "Young man, you're worth teaching," Alchemist Zicheng said with a hearty laugh. He stroked his beard and continued, "I purposefully allowed little Mo to act so haughtily because I wanted to see if anyone dared to speak out. However, it's a shame that no one ever dared to step forward to oppose him." Disappointment spread across his face, and he said, "In fact, this was a test for those holy sons and holy daughters. However, who would have thought that they would all try to please little Mo instead? Heh, they lack even the most basic confidence and toughness, so how can they lead a powerful sect?" If Lu Xianming and the others heard this, they would definitely feel extremely vexed and stifled. Were they not pleasing Alchemy Apprentice Mo out of respect and reverence for Alchemist Zicheng? Now, however, they were being belittled as nothing but trash. However, this made a lot of sense. As holy sons and holy daughters, they should have indeed possessed the toughness and domineering might of leaders. Regardless of how arrogant and wanton Alchemy Apprentice Mo was, he shouldn't have been able to ride on top of the holy sons and holy daughters' heads. Otherwise, what ethics and rules would there still be? Ling Han didn't comment on this. After all, these were the considerations of a high and mighty ruler. He didn't have the right to comment on these matters. "Heh, let's not talk about this. At the very least, you've arrived here," Alchemist Zicheng said, suddenly changing the topic. A look of appreciation spread across his face, and he asked, "Brat, are you interested in joining Alchemy City?" Ling Han smiled and replied, "Since Senior has asked, I naturally have no reason to refuse." "Brat, you were already planning on joining, weren't you? Yet, you've come here to flatter me now." Alchemist Zicheng chuckled and continued, "However, I'm relatively pleased to hear your flattering words." "As long as you're happy," Ling Han said. At this moment, he was no longer haughty and arrogant. He indeed wanted to learn some things from Alchemy City. In fact, he wanted to learn many things. This was a force that had existed for heaven knew how many billions of years. Perhaps it had already existed for several epochs. Thus, it was in possession of countless pill recipes. To Ling Han, these were extremely valuable resources that were no less than celestial king-tier cultivation techniques. One had to realize that Alchemy City had once produced a 5-star alchemist. "You can become the 10th holy son of the Alchemy City," Alchemist Zicheng said with a solemn expression. He paused for a moment before continuing, "However, the position of holy son is incredibly important, so I can't decide this all by myself. I need you to convince everyone with your abilities." Ling Han smiled and said, "Through fighting? This is up my alley, and I can guarantee that I'll beat all of the other holy sons into submission." Alchemist Zicheng faltered upon hearing this. He was rendered slightly speechless. Was his potential successor a born fighter? Upon encountering any disagreement, his first thought was to fight? How barbaric. Alchemists enjoyed an extremely lofty status, so how could they fight and tussle all day long? Doing so would be far too lowly. Through alchemy, of course. Alchemist Zicheng hurriedly corrected. Oh, Ling Han appeared slightly disappointed upon hearing this. This was something that could be resolved with fists, so why couldn't they be more direct and forthright? Alchemist Zicheng felt slightly regretful now. How was this holy son so violent? In the future, would he pummel anyone he didn't like? Wouldn't that be losing face for Alchemy City? His expression was solemn, and he said, if you want to become the 10th holy son of the Alchemy City, you have to prove yourself through your strength in alchemy. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, I know how to refine pills. Alchemist Zicheng roared with laughter, and he said, that can't be considered as refining pills. At most, you're only just barely refining pills. Ling Han wasn't willing to accept this. The first time he had refined a celestial pill, it had already been at the medium level. Thus, was his talent not freakish? Don't be dissatisfied, Alchemist Zicheng said with a chuckle. Your alchemy talent is indeed outstanding. Otherwise, I wouldn't have picked you to transform the decaying ways of Alchemy City. In terms of alchemy, however, you're genuinely a novice. Any random person is 100 times more skilled than you. Ling Han was even more unwilling to accept this, and he was just about to open his mouth to speak. However, Alchemist Zicheng waved his hand, signifying for him to remain silent. Refining alchemical pills is similar to tempering weapons. This isn't a process that's completed in a single step. Instead, it requires many steps and refinements, and a great amount of work, Alchemist Zicheng said in a leisurely voice. Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. Refining pills required many steps and refinements? Was this a joke? When refining pills, one would either succeed or fail. Failure was just that, failure. How could there be any concept of refinement? Alchemist Zicheng noticed his confusion, and he said, take out a celestial pill that you've refined. Ling Han did as he was told, handing a celestial pill to Alchemist Zicheng. Follow me, Alchemist Zicheng said. He led Ling Han into the alchemy room. He then lit up a cauldron, and it was as if he were about to refine a pill. Ling Han gasped upon seeing this. You're truly going to refine my pill again? Alchemist Zicheng didn't explain anything. Instead, he directly tossed the celestial pill into the cauldron before him. He then immediately started to strike the cauldron with his palms. This was no joke, and the force of his strikes roused the great Tao of fire, triggering brilliant rays of regulation light. Under the heat of these profound flames, the celestial pill quickly showed signs of melting. It was also at this moment that Alchemist Zicheng suddenly gave a soft shout and unleashed bursts of light from his palms, sending them into the celestial pill. The celestial pill instantly lit up with a brilliant glow, causing the surroundings to become as dazzling as could be. A look of astonishment spread across Ling Han's face. This was because the celestial pill actually stopped melting. Instead, it started to undergo some other change. He was unable to describe this change, and he could only ascertain that the celestial pill was undergoing some kind of fundamental transformation. In terms of whether this transformation was positive or negative, he also had no idea. Anyhow, this alchemy room possessed the ability to speed up time. One day outside would be equivalent to 100 days inside. Thus, after almost one day in the outside world, 90 or so days had already passed inside the alchemy room. Ling Han had observed Alchemist Zicheng's techniques this entire time. Although he didn't fully understand them, he was certain that a 4-star alchemist wouldn't show him these techniques for no reason. They wouldn't toy with him in such a way. On the 93rd day, Alchemist Zicheng suddenly gave a soft shout before opening his mouth and breathing out a column of purple light. Looking closely, this was an orb of purple flame that was pulsating with a terrifying radiance. This was Grandmaster Zicheng's source power. Each cultivator possessed their own source power, and these were generally very lackluster. Ling Han was an exception, however, and he had obtained 2 source powers of heaven and earth. Otherwise, his source powers wouldn't have been so extravagant. Alchemist Yi Cheng's source power flames enveloped the celestial pill. Theoretically speaking, these flames should have instantly incinerated the celestial pill. However, Alchemist Yi Cheng had clearly controlled his power extremely well. The celestial pill spun around inside the purple flames, and it started to become increasingly transparent, like a crystal. "Exit!" Alchemist Yi Cheng exclaimed as he extended his hand and made a grabbing motion. The celestial pill flew into his palm. "Compare it to before," he said as he casually tossed the celestial pill to Ling Han. Ling Han caught the pill and started to carefully examine it. He immediately exclaimed in surprise. A new golden-veined pattern had appeared on the celestial pill. He observed it again, and he then raised it up to take a sniff. His expression immediately changed, and he exclaimed, "It's reached the high level." This was unfathomable. An alchemical pill should have remained at whatever level it was at upon the completion of its refinement. How could it be refined a second time, and even rise in level? Just what kind of celestial technique was this? Ling Han looked up at Alchemist Yi Cheng, and his eyes were filled with puzzlement and keen interest. Chapter 1888, Becoming a Disciple. Chapter 1888, Becoming a Disciple. Alchemist Yi Cheng was extremely satisfied with Ling Han's current expression. This was exactly what he wanted to see. Only if Ling Han was interested could he impart his skills. Otherwise, it would be a case of forcing a stubborn bull to drink. "Do you want to know why?" Alchemist Yi Cheng asked with a smile.
Yes.
Ling Han replied with a nod. Alchemist Yi Cheng nodded and said, "This is called spirit refinement, and it's a process of intertwining the source power of heaven and earth of the celestial pill with the great Tao. Doing so will elevate the quality of the alchemical pill. Moreover, spirit refinement can be carried out more than once. With each successful spirit refinement, one can elevate the quality of a celestial pill to a new level. Successfully completing one spirit refinement is termed as first refinement. There also exists second refinement, third refinement, fourth refinement, and so on." He paused for a moment before saying, "According to my knowledge, one can complete spirit refinement a total of 9 times. However, each subsequent spirit refinement will increase in difficulty. Moreover, if one fails, the alchemical pill will also be destroyed." The ability of an alchemist isn't merely decided by their star rank. It also depends on how many spirit refinements they can perform. Only those who can complete 5 or more spirit refinements have the right to be called a grandmaster. Ling Han was extremely curious, and he asked, "Senior, how many spirit refinements can you perform?" Alchemist Yi Cheng paused for a moment before answering. The difficulty of spirit refinement varies according to the level of different alchemical pills. Moreover, it's not the case that spirit refinement will be easier on a 1-star alchemical pill than a 4-star alchemical pill. For example, I refined your Tao regulating pill a total of 7 times. If it were a 3-star alchemist, reaching the 3rd refinement or 4th refinement would already be their extreme. My extreme is the 7th refinement. 7th refinement. In other words, he could elevate the quality of an alchemical pill 7 times. After 7 refinements, even an initially low-level alchemical pill would end up being far superior to a pinnacle-level alchemical pill. At that time, how would these pills be ranked? Do you want to learn this? Alchemist Yi Cheng asked with a smile. He wore an expression of eager anticipation as he looked at Ling Han. Producing an outstanding disciple, or perhaps even a disciple who surpassed him, would fill him with a sense of grand achievement. "I do." Ling Han immediately answered with a nod. A haughty expression appeared on Alchemist Yi Cheng's face, and he asked, "But what right do you have to become my disciple? Why are you worthy of my guidance?" Ling Han racked his brain for a good reason. There was definitely no need to mention his cultivation talent. After all, this was an alchemist he was talking to, so he definitely wouldn't give a toss about his cultivation talent. In terms of alchemy ability, however, Alchemist Yi Cheng was already near the peak stage. That being the case, would he need to care about Ling Han's alchemy talent? Ling Han scratched his head. Perhaps he should say that he was confident in becoming a 5-star alchemist, at which time he would bring great reputation to Alchemist Yi Cheng. To produce a 5-star alchemist would naturally bring great honor and glory to the master as well. However, Just like no one could guarantee that they would become a celestial king, no one could guarantee that they would become a 5-star alchemist, either. Let me rephrase my question, Alchemist Yicheng said. He naturally wouldn't reject Ling Han as a disciple. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spoken so much nonsense with him. In fact, he was simply asking these questions to challenge Ling Han a little. Ling Han was young, after all, so he naturally shouldn't become too arrogant and conceited. Why do you want to learn alchemy? Why do I want to learn alchemy? Ling Han pondered over this question, and he realized that he had quite a lot of aspirations. After refining an alchemical pill, he could use it himself, he could give it to those close to him, he could use it to make friends, he could sell it, or he could exchange it for some peculiar item. After all, some items weren't for sale, and they could only be obtained through a fair exchange of items. Ling Han mulled over this question for a long time, and his mind also wandered to Alchemist Yicheng's past history. In the end, he replied, to earn money. He hadn't said this just to please Alchemist Yicheng. He indeed needed a great number of star stones so that he could obtain more godly metal to raise his divine demon sword to the celestial level. This was a huge burden on him, and it was also his biggest motivation to earn more money. Alchemist Yicheng was ecstatic upon hearing this. He clapped his hands and laughed heartily as he said, very well, very well. Pay. To hell with those lofty aspirations, and to hell with rejuvenating alchemy. Pay. Back then, I had only picked up alchemy because I was suffering from poverty. I had no option but to find a way to feed myself. Who would have thought that I was actually so suited for alchemy? I'm willing to take you as my disciple. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. This grandmaster was truly a little, what should he say, crude? However, his crudeness was down to earth, and it resonated with Ling Han. Alchemist Yicheng waved his hand and said, Brat, aren't you going to hurry up and acknowledge me as your master? Even though Ling Han was confident that he could become a 5-star alchemist in the future, this would definitely be an extremely difficult path that was filled with obstacles. Alchemy was similar to cultivation in that both became increasingly difficult as one progressed in level. No, it was even more difficult than cultivation. After all, how many cultivators existed in the celestial realm? However, how many alchemists were there? At the very least, there were celestial kings in the eastern celestial realm. Moreover, there were even 8th heaven celestial kings. However, were there any 5-star alchemists? There had already been tens of billions of years without a 5-star alchemist. As such, a 4-star alchemist was more than skilled enough to become his master. Most importantly, Alchemist Yicheng suited Ling Han's tastes. Indeed, they both appreciated each other's personalities. Ling Han kneeled down and said, Disciple Ling Han pays respects to his master. He performed a deep bow toward his new master. Alchemist Yicheng dragged a chair over and accepted Ling Han's 3 kneels and 9 kowtows. With this small ceremony finished, he happily helped Ling Han up, saying, My good disciple, you're my 4th disciple, but also my only current disciple. A look of reminiscence appeared on his face, and he said, Your 3 senior brothers are already 4-star alchemists now. Although they're still not as skilled as your master, their level already isn't far off. However, all of them have already left. Ling Han was slightly surprised, and he asked, Why? Perhaps they were ungrateful wretches? He felt slightly angry upon thinking of this. This was one of the things that he detested the most. Alchemist Yicheng shook his head and said, If they continued to follow me, they would only be able to reach the same height as me. Their limit would be 4 stars. If they want to become 5-star alchemists, however, they must leave my shadow and discover their own paths. By the looks of it, this was something that both master and disciples had silently agreed on. His 3 previous disciples had all set up their own forces, and they were all attempting to create their own system of alchemy so that they could become a 5-star alchemist. If you can't overcome the ordinary process, you'll also be kicked out in the future, Alchemist Yicheng said in a solemn voice. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, This disciple will definitely try his best so that master doesn't need to kick me out. Alchemist Yicheng laughed heartily upon hearing this. He held high hopes for Ling Han, and it was because of this that he had specially taken Ling Han as his disciple. Otherwise, it had already been tens of billions of years since he had taken his last disciple. However, could Ling Han overcome the barrier of 4 stars and become a 5-star alchemist? Alchemist Zicheng didn't dare to make any categorical claims. He could only say that Ling Han had a sliver of a chance. I'll now hand you your first mission. That is, I want you to become a holy son, he said with a serious expression. I can only propose this, but whether or not the 2 other 4-star alchemists agree is completely up to your performance. I also require you to master the first refinement within a year. 1 year. This was an extremely strict demand. Even with a time cultivation chamber that could accelerate time by 100-fold, this was still only 100 years. It was almost impossible to master the first refinement within this time frame. However, if Ling Han wanted to become a 5-star alchemist, he had to overcome all forms of difficulties and impossibilities. Chapter 1889, Promise. Chapter 1889, Promise. Afterward, Alchemist Zicheng taught Ling Han many things regarding spirit refinement. Of course, he also told Ling Han about the 2 other 4-star alchemists who resided in Alchemy City. One of them was called Heavenly Heart, and he was an extremely peculiar being. This was because he had no parent. He hadn't been produced by a mother and a father. Instead, he had been nurtured by heaven and earth. His true body was actually a celestial pill. In terms of the exact time that he had been created, it was already too long ago to say with certainty. However, it was extremely likely that he had been created 1 epoch ago. At that time, there had still been a 5-star alchemist in Alchemy City, and he had refined a total of 11 celestial pills during his lifetime. One of them was the Heavenly Heart Tao-seeking pill. In fact, this was the last celestial pill that the 5-star alchemist had refined. At the same time, it was also a culmination of his pinnacle skill, and it was the alchemical pill that he was the proudest of. As such, he always kept it by his side. As time passed, this celestial pill gradually gained awareness and sentience. It developed intelligence, and it eventually became a genuine life form. And thereupon, there was now Alchemist Heavenly Heart. Because of his being a completely different life form, Alchemist Heavenly Heart's personality was also extremely different from everyone else. He was completely invested in alchemy, and his goal was to create more life forms like himself so that he wouldn't need to be lonely anymore. The other 4-star alchemist was called Chuyi, and he was an old geezer who had a strong addiction to wine. He also liked to travel around, and he was perhaps the only person in the world who had traveled throughout the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. According to rumors, this old geezer was even willing to casually exchange celestial pills for wine. However, because he liked to travel, Chuyi was almost never in Alchemy City. He would only return once every few thousand or tens of thousands of years. It was because of this that Alchemist Zicheng could wield so much power in the Alchemy City. At the same time, it was also because of this that Alchemy Apprentice Imo, a measly alchemy apprentice, could become so arrogant and haughty. In fact, he was almost riding on the heads of the holy sons and holy daughters. However, to appoint a new holy son was a matter of great significance. Thus, Alchemist Zicheng couldn't decide this all by himself. Instead, he needed to seek agreement from the 2 other 4-star alchemists. Seeking agreement from Alchemist Heavenly Heart would be relatively easy. After all, he also resided in Alchemy City. However, no one knew where Alchemist Chuyi had run off to. Even if they possessed message transmission talismans to directly communicate with each other, just how large was the celestial realm? Thus, how long would it take for Alchemist Chuyi to return? That being the case, Alchemist Zicheng had given Ling Han a deadline of 1 year. In reality, this was a relatively relaxed requirement. After all, Alchemist Chuyi definitely couldn't return within such a short time. Anyhow, Grandmaster Zicheng had set this requirement so that Ling Han would feel some pressure. Moreover, when Alchemy City appointed a new holy son, they would also need to invite the various forces in the surroundings to take part in the ceremony. Because of Grandmaster Zicheng's kindness, Ling Han naturally couldn't hide his dirty secrets any longer. He revealed that he had once killed the holy son and holy daughter of 2 separate celestial king tier forces. Alchemist Zicheng's expression became extremely spectacular. Sure enough, this disciple was a huge troublemaker. To kill the holy sons, holy daughters, or successors of celestial king-tier forces on a whim. Not only was this audacious, but it also represented absolute strength. No wonder he had even defeated Zhao Qingfeng. "No worries," the elder said as he gritted his teeth. However, even though he said this, the bulging veins on his forehead were extremely clear. Alchemy City was a 4-star force, so its most powerful elite was only at the ascending origin tier. Even with the lofty status of alchemists, it was still a struggle for them to rival celestial king-tier forces. As such, they naturally couldn't compare to genuine 5-star forces. If Ling Han had only pummeled or severely wounded the successors of some celestial king-tier forces, Alchemy City could naturally resolve these situations by offering some compensation. With their lofty status as alchemists, the two celestial king-tier forces naturally wouldn't be too overbearing. Now, however, Ling Han had actually killed the most talented successors of these two celestial king-tier forces. That being the case, they had absolutely no reason to spare him. "Fortunately, you have the support of the Rock Palace," Grandmaster Zicheng said with a sigh of relief. "I've traveled to the Western Celestial Realm in the past, and I had wanted to find a skilled master there so that I could advance to become a 5-star alchemist. Thus, I have some slight understanding of this Rock Palace. This is a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force, and such a powerful force is rare even in the Western Celestial Realm. It's a true ruler of the lands. With the Rock Palace's support, and with my help, we can perhaps resolve this troublesome situation. After all, the Zai clan and the Thundercloud Palace are only 1st Heaven Celestial King tier forces." An expression of pride and haughtiness spread across Alchemist Zicheng's face as he said this. Perhaps Grandmaster Zicheng was the only ascending origin tier elite who dared to say that these were only 1st Heaven Celestial King tier forces. This expression of confidence and haughtiness was not something that ordinary holy sons and holy daughters could possess. Ling Han nodded and said, "I've caused trouble for Master." Alchemist Zicheng wore a strange expression, and he said, "I have a nagging feeling that you'll only be causing more trouble in the future. Sigh. I truly wonder whether taking you as a disciple is a blessing or a disaster for Alchemy City." To say this before Ling Han, it was clear that Grandmaster Zicheng already treated him as a true member of Alchemy City. He didn't avoid saying this at all. Ling Han was rendered completely speechless. He was a magnet for trouble, and this had been proved time and time again. Not to mention more distant matters, he had only just defeated Zhao Qingfeng. If this caught the attention of Yin Xinlu, what would he do if Yin Xinlu wanted to take him as a subordinate? He definitely wouldn't agree to this. At that time, would he have to fight with Yin Xinlu? However, he truly wanted to fight with Yin Xinlu. This was someone who had been born on the celestial path and was renowned as an unparalleled monarch tier. Just how powerful was he? Of course, this fight definitely couldn't take place now. After all, Yin Xinlu had most likely reached the 5th severance already. If Ling Han battled with him now, he would definitely be pummeled if not killed. Under the corrosive refinement power of regulations, it would be useless regardless of how tough his godly bones were. So, my current aim is to reach the 1st refinement and reach the peak stage of the 4th severance. Afterward, I need to open the door to the 5th severance, Ling Han said in his mind. Upon thinking of this, he mentioned the natural peach seal to Grandmaster Zicheng. "You actually want to reach the 5th severance?" Grandmaster Zicheng asked in shock. He was truly given a fright. Defeating Zhao Qingfeng had indeed proved the strength and talent of Ling Han. However, the 5th severance, this was far too intangible and unreachable. In fact, many considered the 5th severance as nothing more than a legend. They viewed this as an unreachable level. However, his disciple actually wanted to reach the pinnacle of both cultivation and alchemy? The elder pondered for a moment before saying, "Very well. As long as you become a holy son, your master will give you a natural peach seal." He could only agree to this request because he was the true ruler of Alchemy City right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to pat his chest and make such a bold promise. A bashful smile appeared on Ling Han's face, and he asked, "Master, can I have two?" Grandmaster Zicheng widened his eyes in astonishment. "Why do you want two? Perhaps you want to use one to eat the other?" Ling Han rubbed his hands and said, my wife also needs one." Grandmaster Zicheng was astounded upon hearing this. Another person aiming to reach the fifth severance. Holy crap! This was a legendary level. What did legendary mean? Legendary meant that it only existed in legends and was impossible to find in real life. Now, however, not only was Ling Han aiming to reach the fifth severance, but even his wife was aiming to reach the fifth severance. Perhaps he had refined alchemical pills for far too long, so much so that he had become senile and foolish. Perhaps he had been cooped up in his house for too long, so much so that his news had become outdated. No, he had to drink some wine 820 million years old to suppress his astonishment. We'll discuss this when you become a holy son. If you succeed, this will be your reward from Master. In the end, Grandmaster Zicheng gritted his teeth and agreed to Ling Han's request. Even though he was an alchemist, he truly wanted to witness the birth of a fifth severance monarch tier. Two, in fact. Moreover, they both had extremely strong ties and relationships with him. Chapter 1890, Alchemy Path. Chapter 1890, Alchemy Path. Ling Han instantly felt much more at ease after receiving Alchemist Zicheng's promise. Otherwise, he and the Empress would have to suppress their cultivation after reaching the peak stage of the fourth severance. They wouldn't be able to advance an inch further. In just 1 year, he had to both master the first refinement and also reach the peak stage of the fourth severance. This was fairly difficult. However, this was a good and interesting challenge. Ling Han was filled with ambition, and he started to ask Alchemist Zicheng all kinds of questions regarding spirit refinement. To Celestials, resting was almost not needed. Thus, the master and disciple completely lost track of time. The master was fully focused on teaching, and the disciple was fully focused on learning. Fortunately, they were inside the alchemy room, which could speed up time by 100-fold. After half a year, Ling Han finally had some slight grasp of spirit refinement. Meanwhile, only a mere 2 days had passed in the outside world. "I can lead through the door, but what you achieve is completely up to yourself," Grandmaster Zicheng said with a serious expression. "If there's anything you're unsure about, come over to ask me. However, if you want to surpass me, it's best that you learn how to ponder questions by yourself. If you can resolve them yourself, then it's best that you resolve them yourself." Grandmaster Zicheng had learned this through experience. His first disciple had also been a prodigy in alchemy, and he had viewed him as a great treasure. If his disciple had any questions, he would immediately answer them. In the end, however, his first disciple turned out to be the least skilled among all of his disciples. When teaching his 2 later disciples, Grandmaster Zicheng changed his teaching method slightly. Instead of directly answering their questions, he would guide them to independently resolve their problems. However, he had still interfered too much. Even though the achievements of these 2 disciples surpassed those of his first disciple, he still hadn't unlocked their maximum potential. Thus, he was going to teach Ling Han differently. He was going to force him to think by himself and resolve any problems by himself. He didn't want Ling Han to overly rely on him. After bidding farewell to Alchemist Zicheng, Ling Han left the mansion and returned to the 4th level. Outsiders couldn't stay in the 5th level, and this was a strict rule. This was unless Ling Han gave up his status as disciple and became an alchemy apprentice instead. If he did so, he could indeed stay in the 5th level. No one knew who had made this rule, but it had already existed for countless years. Even Alchemist Zicheng abided by it. Ling Han didn't think too much about this. Anyhow, there were also alchemy rooms that could speed up time by 100-fold in the 4th level of the Alchemist Pavilion. Thus, staying here wouldn't affect his pill refinement. Moreover, he spent a large majority of his time cultivating under the reincarnation tree anyway, so this didn't matter too much. Creak. He walked over and pushed the gates open. "Ah!" Alchemy apprentice Emo exclaimed upon seeing him. He was currently standing guard outside the gates, and he naturally didn't dare to enter the mansion without Alchemist Zicheng's permission. Perhaps Alchemy Apprentice Mo appeared extremely high and mighty in the eyes of others. In reality, however, he was nothing more than a measly guard. However, there were no outsiders here, so no one could see Alchemy Apprentice Mo in such a state. Otherwise, they wouldn't have feared him so greatly. Alchemy Apprentice Mo stared at Ling Han, and it was as if he were looking at a ghost. His eyes were wide and bulging. What's going on? How is Ling Han walking out unscathed? Grandmaster Zicheng had summoned this brat twice, and Ling Han had directly flicked his sleeves and left the first time. Although he had accepted the invitation the second time, he had also forced Grandmaster Zicheng to wait for an extremely long time. Thus, Alchemy Apprentice Mo was certain that Ling Han would definitely be cut into 8 pieces and ground into fine powder. Was he hallucinating? He was definitely hallucinating. A wide smile stretched across Ling Han's face. With a wave, he said, "Oi, this isn't a hallucination." "Impossible!" Alchemy Apprentice Mo exclaimed, jumping 9 meters into the air. It was as if someone had stepped onto his non-existent tail. His face was filled with shock and terror, and his voice was shaking as he pointed at Ling Han and said, "No, no, no, this is definitely my internal demon. There's no way that you're a living person." "Pa!" Ling Han slapped him across the face, saying in a calm voice, "Can an internal demon slap you?" "No, this must be a test from my internal demon," Alchemy Apprentice Mo exclaimed. His gaze was resolute, yet his expression was dazed. "Pa, pa, pa." Ling Han slapped him several more times. However, Alchemy Apprentice Mo remained staunch in his belief that this was an internal demon. His resolution was truly admirable. Has he gone stupid? Ling Han stroked his chin in thought. So be it. Who cares about this kind of measly person? It's beneath me to worry about him. Ling Han flicked his sleeves and left. Meanwhile, Alchemy Apprentice Mo wore a dazed expression as he continued to stammer. "This is an internal demon. This is definitely my internal demon." After returning to the 4th level, Ling Han headed to the Alchemist Pavilion once again. He remained calm, and he also kept a low profile. However, his reappearance sent giant waves through the Alchemist Pavilion. Ling Han had beaten up Alchemist Zicheng, and he had then gone to visit Alchemist Zicheng. Yet, he had actually returned safe and sound. To this was far too unfathomable. However, there were also many smart people, and they immediately came to a conclusion. Alchemist Zicheng greatly appreciated Ling Han, so he had forgiven him for his act of disrespect. Since this was the case, they definitely had to seize this opportunity. Numerous powerful clans dispatched their most skillful members to convince Ling Han to join them. He was a rising star, and his future was incredibly bright and limitless. If they could recruit him, their clan would definitely enjoy glory for countless generations to come. However, it was a shame that none of them could even see Ling Han. He had already started to cultivate in seclusion. Meanwhile, Lu Xianming, Qing Guyu, and the others all wore extremely dark expressions. Ling Han's performance was far too freakish. Not only was he a prodigy in both cultivation and alchemy, but he had even reached a pinnacle in both of these areas. This caused them to feel immense apprehension. Following Ling Han's rise in cultivation level, who could still defeat him and dispose of him in the future. Thus, they had to act as soon as possible. However, Ling Han was currently residing in the Alchemist Pavilion, so how could they assassinate him? If they could, what would be the use of the Alchemist Pavilion? That being the case, they could only silently bide their time. In fact, they were still unaware that Ling Han had already become Alchemist Zicheng's disciple. If they learned of this, they would either lose all fighting spirit, or they would take even greater risks, putting everything on the line. Under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han was currently digesting what Alchemist Zicheng had taught him about spirit refinement. Each branch of alchemists had its own unique spirit refinement technique. One couldn't help but admire the wisdom of the founders of these different branches. With their understanding of celestial medicines, and with their comprehension of the Great Tao, they had managed to forcefully elevate the level of celestial pills. It was said that through enough spirit refinements, one could even transform a failed alchemical pill into a genuine alchemical pill. Right now, Ling Han didn't possess any foundation. Thus, his only option was to learn. However, learning alone wouldn't allow him to surpass the peak of Alchemist Zicheng's achievements. At most, he would only be able to reach the same height. Back then, Alchemist Zicheng had surpassed the peak level of his own master. Even though he was still a 4-star alchemist, he could reach the 7th refinement instead of the 6th refinement. According to rumors, only by reaching the 9th refinement could one push open the doors to becoming a 5-star alchemist. In other words, spirit refinement was of utmost importance. Ling Han was in no hurry to start. Instead, he cultivated and pondered for a whopping 10,000 years. Only then did he conclude his cultivation. Spending 10,000 years under the reincarnation tree meant 100 days had also passed in the outside world. This was quite a long time. At this moment, the Empress was also cultivating. She was incredibly confident in Ling Han, and she was convinced that he could definitely obtain the natural peach seals. Thus, her current task was simply to advance to the peak stage of the 4th severance as soon as possible. She would then refine the heavenly Dao Jade to enter the realm of Monarch tier. Meanwhile, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden could only wait for an opportunity to advance to the severing mundane tier. However, there were 2 infants in the Black Tower, and this brought her some comfort. At the very least, she wouldn't feel bored. These were spirit infants that had been born from the source power of heaven and earth. They were intrinsically close to Tao, and when they grew up, they would definitely become kings among kings. Thus, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was filled with energy and vigor. She couldn't achieve great heights herself, so wouldn't it feel extremely satisfying and accomplishing to raise 2 outstanding prodigies? Ling Han was also happy to leave her to this. When these 2 infants grew up, he would take them as his disciples. Even though he would offload their education and guidance to others, taking disciples was still a fairly fun matter. The Empress continued to cultivate in seclusion, while the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden took the 2 infants out for a breath of fresh air. Elsewhere, Ling Han entered an alchemy room, beginning his difficult path of mastering the 1st refinement. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.